Chapter 876. At that moment, Yi Chen stood in the air with the true martial thousand lightning sword in his hand. Lightning flickered all over his body, and even his long hair was flickering with lightning. The true martial thousand lightning sword in his hand expanded to 15 meters long. It pierced through the sky, splitting the clouds and shaking the mountains and rivers. Sword chi spread out within a radius of 300 meters. Even Elder Earth's sword and Granny Snake's expressions changed at this moment. An unprecedented sense of danger gradually emerged in their hearts. Mad Southern Yi, I admit that you have the combat strength of a supreme giant. How about we stop this battle? Granny Snake's expression changed a few times before she suddenly said, After all, you can't kill me, and I can't kill you either. One sword strike is enough to kill you. Yi Chen was like a god. Divine radiance surged as he swung the true martial thousand lightning sword that was 15 meters long. That domineering aura was truly like the descent of a god, looking down on all living beings and suppressing everything. A giant sword that could hold up the sky traversed the sky. Everyone's pupils constricted. In their eyes, it was as if there was only that giant sword in the world. ****starred. Granny Snake was furious, but her expression was unprecedentedly solemn. She stared fixedly at the giant sword that tore through the sky. She subconsciously wanted to break through space and leave. However, she was fast, but the sword was even faster. A monstrous sword gleam slashed down from the sky as if it was going to split the sky. The supreme giant of the witchcraft sect, Granny Snake, who wanted to kill Yi Chen, let out an indignant roar. Her roar was filled with fear. Whoosh! As the sword gleam slashed, a bloody wound suddenly appeared on Granny Snake's body. She lowered her head and stared blankly at the wound on her chest. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. The crack grew larger and larger. In the end, it exploded and warm blood splattered into the sky. Granny Snake's soul shot out as if she wanted to escape, but she was destroyed by a bolt of purple heaven divine lightning. The supreme giant of the witchcraft sect, Granny Snake, was dead. The world was dead silent. Everyone's gazes froze as if they had been petrified. One sword strike is enough to kill you. Yi Chen's words earlier were like rolling thunder that still exploded in their minds. It was so shocking. Gulp! In the silence of the world, someone swallowed a mouthful of saliva, followed by a series of swallowing sounds. One strike. It was really just one strike. Just this one sword strike had killed a supreme giant. Boom! Elder Earth Sword, who witnessed this scene with his own eyes, was shocked. He retreated rapidly and was horrified. What kind of swordsmanship is that? He did not believe that Yi Chen could kill a supreme giant with one strike. However, the truth was right before his eyes. There was only one explanation left. Yi Chen's sword attack earlier must have been some secret technique. Moreover, he could not simply perform it. Yi Chen shook his head secretly when he sensed the loss of quintessential origin energy in his dantian. As expected, magic treasures that haven't been sacrificially refined consume quintessential origin energy. Ever since he refined the true martial thousand lightning sword, he hadn't used his true essence to refine it, so he couldn't merge his mind with it. Although he had managed to kill Granny Snake in the end, it had also consumed most of his quintessential essence. His silence made Elder Earth Sword even more certain of his guess. Just as I expected, you can't slash out like before anymore, right? He stared at Yi Chen with killing intent all over his face. I'd like to see what other tricks you have. Blood sword technique. Elder Earth Sword swung his sword through the air. He immediately bit the tip of his tongue and spat a mouthful of blood essence onto the void-crushing sword. At the next moment, after the void-crushing sword in front of him absorbed his blood, the sword trembled violently and began to expand. 3 meters, 2 meters, 3 meters. Elder Earth Sword spat 3 mouthfuls of blood essence in a row. His hair started to turn white at a visible speed, and his skin became like wrinkled old bark. In the end, the void-crushing sword in his hand grew to a length of 30 meters. Its entire body was dyed blood-red, like the blade of the Grim Reaper, and its murderous aura increased greatly. At the same time, Luo Tianya's expression changed. Blood sword technique. He's actually using the blood sword technique. The so-called blood sword technique was to use blood to nourish the sword, allowing its power to increase explosively and finally unleash its full potential. However, the price was equivalent to consuming one's life force. Unless it was absolutely necessary, it would not be used easily. Now that Elder Earth Sword had used this technique, it was clear that he wanted to fight Yi Chen to the death. Firstly, he suspected that Yi Chen could not slash out earlier. Secondly, he could not abandon the true martial Thousand Lightning Sword. Slash. Elder Earth Sword roared furiously. The void-crushing sword in his hand left his hand and slashed at Yi Chen with a bloody gleam that soared into the sky. Even a supreme giant would not dare to take that strike head-on. It contained all of Elder Earth Sword's essence, energy, and spirit. I don't believe that you can slash out like that. Elder Earth Sword glared at Yi Chen and scoffed. Boom! Yi Chen slashed again with the true martial Thousand Lightning Sword in his hand. It shook the surroundings, and heaven and earth shook. The void-crushing sword that Elder Earth Sword was slashing at him collapsed. The sword gleam did not slow down at all as it slashed at Elder Earth Sword. Elder Earth Sword's pupils suddenly widened. His body suddenly trembled as he lifted his head to look at Yi Chen with difficulty. How is this possible? At the next moment, as his vision turned upside down, his head flew into the sky. He had made the wrong bet. Yi Chen could still slash out that strike earlier. As his body fell rapidly, a soul shot out from his body and turned into a sword gleam that shot into the sky. Yi Chen controlled his body to land steadily. He looked at the sky and shook his head lightly. What a pity! The last strike exhausted all of his true origin energy. Otherwise, the other party's soul would not have been able to escape. At that moment, everyone fell into dead silence. Only a thin figure stood at the peak of the mountain. His facial features were so ordinary, but at that moment, he was like a god that ruled the world. After a long while, someone let out a heavy sigh. His lips trembled as he said word by word. He killed 2 supreme giants with 2 strikes. He killed 2 supreme giants with 2 slashes. Mad Southern Yi is going to suppress Kung Su alone. At the same time, compared to the shock on Kwokang Mountain, the sword sect was also bustling with noise and excitement. Countless forces rushed to the sword sect. What was shocking was that all the forces in the Kunlun ruins had arrived. Among them were Purple Cap Mountain, Witchcraft Sect, Corpse Sect, Spirit Talisman Sect, Star Sect, Tao Sect, Devil Sect, Ghoul Sect, and the other 10 supreme sections. That was because today was a rare occasion in the Sword Sect. The Sword Sect's 9th Peak's Sword Son, Yi Wushuang, was going to challenge the Sword Sect's 1st Peak's Sword Son, Su Qilin. Before Yi Chen stepped into the Kunlun ruins, Su Qilin and Yi Wushuang were the most popular people in the entire Kunlun ruins. Both of them were geniuses that were hard to come by in 1,000 years in the Kunlun ruins. Now that the 2 geniuses that were hard to come by in 1,000 years were about to engage in a life-and-death battle, how could the entire Kunlun ruins not pay attention to it? After all, the survival of one of them represented the future direction of the Sword Sect, and it also represented who would inherit the Sword Sect. Chapter 877. Snowflakes rustled in Sword Sect's 9th Peak. The 9th Peak was as desolate and dilapidated as ever. When placed before the 8 peaks of Sword Sect, it seemed to be completely insignificant. Ever since the previous peak master passed away, the 9th Peak's talents had dwindled, and it had been repeatedly suppressed by the other 8 peak. Every time the sect recruited disciples, the talented disciples would be divided among the 8 peak. On the other hand, the people the 9th Peak got were people with mediocre potential. These people with mediocre aptitudes had to lower their heads in front of the disciples of the 8 Peaks, and were often bullied. After a long time, even those with mediocre aptitudes couldn't take it anymore and left the mountain on their own, never to return. The people of the 9th Peak initially thought that after Yi Wuxiang appeared, the sect would change its attitude toward the 9th Peak. Never had they thought that they would become more and more upset. If not for Elder Qing Xian's frequent teachings, some of the people from the 9th Peak would have questioned the sect a long time ago. After it started snowing, the 9th summit became even more deserted. Even the immortal cranes that originally belonged to the 9th summit ran away to the 1st summit, because the 1st summit had a rune to repel the cold. Elder Qing Xian was still meditating on the cold spring that was only a few dozen feet wide. Even the clamor in the sword sect could not disturb him. At this moment, a young man dressed in white appeared in front of him. The youth allowed the snowflakes to hit his body. His cold eyes slowly landed on Elder Qing Xian. He only stared at him without saying a word. Elder Qing Xian slowly opened his eyes and looked at the young man in front of him calmly. After a while, he slowly said, "Do you know why you're going? Kill." The white-robed youth was a man of few words. Elder Qing Xian was still extremely calm. "What if he doesn't return? Then don't come back," the young man said. Elder Qing Xian said, "Then go." The white-robed youth did not say anything else. He turned around and walked out. He had only taken a few steps when he slowly turned around and knelt down on one knee towards the figure on the cold spring. After the ceremony, he swaggered off. After he left, Qing Xian opened his eyes again and asked himself, "Senior brother, does the 9th Peak still have a future?" A stream of tears slowly fell from the corner of her eyes. Then it turned into ice. There were 8 people standing quietly outside the 9th summit. None of them spoke. Before Yi Wuxiang entered the 9th Peak, they were all the disciples of the huge 9th Peak. There were a total of 8 of them. They were ranked from Gu Quan, the eldest senior brother, to Hua Ling, the youngest junior sister. After Yi Wuxiang came in, he was ranked number 9. He became the junior brother with the least experience. However, none of the 8 senior brothers and sisters bullied him. They all treated him like a little brother. They had witnessed the entrance of Wuxiang, the youngest disciple, and the rise of Wuxiang, who had always been silent. And now, he was going to witness the death of his junior brother? Hua Ling, the little junior sister in everyone's eyes, covered her red lips and cried nonstop. Her eyes were red and tears flowed down. "Eldest senior brother, can you not? Don't let youngest junior brother go?" Hua Ling wiped her tears and looked at Gu Quan helplessly. As she cried, a few people could no longer hold back their tears. The 5th junior brother clenched his fists and sobbed, "It's fine if you want to go, but let me go. I'm useless anyway." In his early years, he was framed by the people of the 1st Peak and had one of his legs crippled. He was now a cripple in everyone's eyes. That's right. Youngest junior brother is the future of our 9th Peak. If anything happens to him... The 4th junior brother hugged the wine jar, and the smell of alcohol filled the air. "All of you, shut up." The eldest senior brother, Gu Quan, scolded with a straight face. His eyes were slightly red. "This is youngest junior brother's decision. We can't change it, why not? Wouldn't it be fine as long as we knock him out and tie him up?" Hua Ling said with tears in her eyes. Gu Quan said, "Can you defeat youngest junior brother?" Hua Ling was speechless. Gu Quan smiled bitterly and self-deprecatingly. "If we could defeat youngest junior brother, would we have waited until now? If I were youngest junior brother's opponent, I would have been the one to fight today." Just as he was speaking, a white robe walked over gently. "Youngest junior brother." The 8 of them immediately shouted with complicated expressions. The white-clothed youth stopped in his tracks. His cold gaze swept across the 8 of them one by one, and there was a trace of heat in the depths of his eyes. "Take care of Elder Qing Xian." With that, the youth was about to leave. "Wait, At that moment, Hua Ling suddenly stopped him and took out a sword case. Youngest junior brother, this is your sword. Bring it with you. Gu Quan walked over and opened the sword case. When he saw the long sword, his expression suddenly changed. He could not help but glare at her fiercely. When did you? He clearly remembered that after they brought the longsword back, Taoist priest Qin Xian had put it away and did not allow them to give it to youngest junior brother. But now it was stolen by Hua Ling. Just as Hua Ling was about to speak, she saw the longsword in the sword case automatically fly into the young man's hand. The young man raised his eyes slightly and looked at Hua Ling in confusion. Why is this sword with you? This is my. Hua Ling subconsciously wanted to tell him that she and Gu Quan had gone to Border Dragon City. However, he was interrupted by Gu Quan's cough. Little junior brother, this is the money that Elder Qin Xian gave us to redeem for you. After saying that, he glared at Hua Ling and said with an unnatural expression, Youngest junior brother, give me the sword. Use my sword, there's no need. The young man in white shook his head slightly. Holding the long sword, he turned into a sword gleam and shot out of the 9th peak, completely disappearing from everyone's sight. Eldest senior brother, why do you keep stopping me from telling the truth? After he left, Hua Ling said unhappily, also, if youngest junior brother finds out that his brother is looking for him, he'll definitely be very happy. Have you forgotten Elder Qin Xian's instructions? Youngest junior brother's sword is a calamity. When Gu Quan heard this, he looked at her with a disappointed expression. Also, there are already 2 supreme giants who have gone to cause trouble for youngest junior brother's brother. Are you trying to kill him by telling youngest junior brother at this time? Hua Ling's face turned pale when she heard that. She was extremely glad. Sword Sex First Peak. At that moment, countless people had already gathered. As far as the eye could see, people were surging. Fortunately, the first peak was large enough, so the scene was not too crowded. Above the many seats, there were rows of incomparably large VIP seats. At that moment, there were figures with powerful auras sitting on them. When the people below occasionally swept their gazes over, their eyes were filled with reverence. That was because the people sitting there were people from the 10 supreme sects, including the sword sect, the host. Everyone had come for today's battle. Compared to the silence on the VIP seats, the many seats below were extremely noisy. A sect master coughed dryly and asked, Everyone, guess who will win this battle? Nonsense, is there a need to guess? Naturally, the person from the sword sect's first peak will win this battle. Another powerhouse chuckled. That's right, I bet that the person from the first peak will win. For a moment, countless people expressed their stance. Most of them thought highly of the sword sect's first peak's sword son. However, the sect master from before shook his head. In my opinion, that's not the case. Perhaps you guys haven't clearly understood these 2 people. Just as he was about to show off his knowledge, an incomparably sharp sword intent suddenly flashed over from the horizon. The sword intent soared up, wanting to cut through everything. Countless people looked at the proposal that was getting closer and closer, and their hearts trembled. He's here, he's here. P.S. Chapter 4. Today's update has been completed. The missing chapters will be added in the next few days. Chapter 878. Sword Sex First Peak. Under everyone's gazes, the incomparably sharp sword intent in the sky became more and more intense, as if a divine sword was descending from the sky. Under this terrifying sword intent, the origin energy in the world started to change, and in the end, it condensed into a vortex that soared into the sky. The moment the vortex appeared, it suddenly started to spin crazily, as if a strange power had descended from the sky. At this moment the weather changed, and the weather changed. A white figure slowly appeared in the sky filled with berserk yuan power. It was a white-clothed young man who was only 17 or 18 years old. His eyes were as bright as stars, and his expression was cold. He stood there like a sharp sword that was about to be unsheathed. With his appearance, the tens of thousands of people in the surrounding seats all felt the sword intent descending from the sky. This sword intent was earth-shattering. Ding, ding, ding. Just as everyone was in a daze, countless people suddenly realized that the swords in their hands had started to tremble violently, as if they had suddenly come to life. Before they could react, the swords in their hands shot out uncontrollably. For a moment, the sky was filled with sword gleams. What was shocking was that the sword gleams actually circled around the white-clothed figure, emitting waves of sword hums. Just the sword intent alone is enough to cause all swords to bow. A powerhouse stared blankly at the white-clothed figure and the almost materialized sword intent that filled the sky. He was shocked, as expected of the Ninth Peak's sword son. If this kid doesn't die in this battle, his achievements in the future will definitely be beyond our imagination. A mighty figure suddenly stood up, his pupils constricting. With his cultivation, he could naturally tell that the white-clothed young man in the distance did not emit any origin energy fluctuation, but he was able to do this. Only by comprehending the limits of the sword could he do so. How good would it be if this kid appeared in our star sect? No one in the younger generation dares to compete with him. Even the so-called supreme paragons are no exception. For a moment, all the leaders of the various forces who came to watch the battle were moved by the white-clothed young man. Even the people from the 9 high sects were no exception. So handsome! He's a little small, but he doesn't mind. Hussy, are you love-struck again? Many of the female cultivators present were also captivated by the white-robed young man's appearance, and from time to time, they would let out sounds of infatuation. They were not the only ones. Even the people from the sword sect's first peak gasped. This little bastard has become stronger again. The eyes of one of the elders from the first summit were like lightning as he stared fixedly at the white-robed figure. His expression was dark and uncertain. He must have cleared the 9th summit's sword forest. What? Hearing this, the rest of the people cried out in surprise. After all, ever since the previous peak master died, no one had been able to enter the sword forest of Sword Sect's 9th peak. Even the arrogant people of the first peak were no exception, but now, a 17 or 18-year-old kid had done it. Just as everyone was whispering to each other, a beautiful figure in black suddenly dashed to the side of the white-clothed youth. Wushuang, why did you insist on coming? The beautiful woman's face was filled with disappointment. Her beautiful eyes were mixed with anger, and there was even a hint of love. As the voice fell, everyone could not help but look over. They realized that it was a tall woman in black around the age of 24 or 25. Her aura was cold, and there was a hint of arrogance between her brows. A powerhouse immediately frowned. Who is this woman? Why is she only at the Grandmaster stage? Judging from her chaotic aura, she must have just stepped into the Grandmaster stage not long ago. Hee, you guys probably don't know. Someone who knew chuckled and introduced. This woman's surname is Su, and her name is Yue. It's said that she came from the secular world and broke through from a mortal to the Grandmaster stage in less than a month. Both her looks and talent are excellent. Her surname is Su? Could she be the relative of that person from the first peak? That's right, this woman is the younger sister of that person from the first peak. TSK, in the quiet crowd, faint sounds of discussion rang out one after another. Everyone's gazes towards the beautiful figure had changed. So it was the younger sister of the Sword Sect's first peak's sword son. That was not surprising. However, everyone knew that in the Sword Sect, the first peak and the 9th peak were like fire and water. Why did this woman care so much about Yi Wushuang? Thinking to this point, many people's eyes flickered, and they looked at Su Yue and Yi Wushuang with a hint of playfulness in their eyes. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Wushuang's expression remained cold when faced with Su Yue's question. He did not say a word and took a step forward to walk past her. Stop! Su Yue berated. Do you know that you'll die? The latter hurriedly stopped him and bit her lip. You know that you're no match for my brother, so why did you issue him a death match? However, Yi Wuxiang said nothing. Just because my brother suppressed you? You and Yi Chen are like brothers, and Yi Chen is my brother's brother-in-law. Su Yue's expression was extremely complicated, speaking of which, we're considered family. Since we're family, what hatred can't be resolved? Must we fight to the death? She originally thought that the person in front of her would more or less listen to her good intentions, but his expression was still cold. Are you done? You. Su Yue was furious. If you're done, then move aside. Yi Wuxiang did not say anything else. Subsequently, under countless gazes, he took a step forward and turned into a sword gleam that flashed towards the first peak's main peak. Be *starred, you be *starred, Su Yue, who was standing on the spot, was on the verge of tears. Her eyes were slightly red. Yi Chen is like this, and so are you. Why are you doing this to me? Everyone raised their heads and looked at the misty clouds with reverence. In the middle, there was a lotus seat condensed from spirit talismans, and a figure sat cross-legged on it. It was a middle-aged man in a green robe, but he had a head of white hair. His eyes were deep and vast like the starry sky, giving off a feeling that dogs could not look at him directly. He did not release any aura, but when he stood there, it was as if the entire world was under his feet. This person was the Sword Sect Master Ling Xuanzi. Everyone could not help but look down and discover that there were two figures on the two lotus seats beside him. Compared to the Sword Sect Master, Ling Xuanzi, the two figures seemed older. However, their faces were extremely dignified like two gods. It was the first peak's peak master, Old Man Mysterious Sword. Together with Elder Heaven Sword and Elder Earth Sword who died in Yi Chen's hands earlier, they were known as the three supreme giants of the first peak. Yi Wuxiang, have you thought it through? The first peak's peak master, Old Man Mysterious Sword, looked straight at the clouds with an extremely cold gaze. Once the challenge is issued, only one of you can live. Yi Wuxiang did not say anything. Instead, he looked down at the first peak from above. With a wave of his hand, a sword gleam immediately landed in a cave abode on the first peak. At the next moment, an extremely calm voice exploded in the first peak. The Sword Sect's ninth peak's Yi Wuxiang challenges the first peak's Su Qilin. Since we're going to determine who's stronger, we'll also decide life and death. Chapter 879. The Sword Sect's ninth peak's Yi Wuxiang challenged the first peak's Su Qilin. It was a battle of life and death. Boom! The world was suddenly filled with extremely dense sword intent, and under this sword intent, there was a thunderous sound that interweaved endlessly. It's a sword invitation. Yi Wuxiang actually sent a sword invitation to Su Qilin. Looks like this is really a fight to the death. At this moment, countless people's expressions changed. The so-called sword invitation was the most formal procedure between sword cultivators. It was like a life and death agreement between ordinary martial artists. Once it was sent out, it could not be taken back unless the challenged party did not accept it. Swoosh! In an instant, everyone subconsciously looked towards a cave abode less than 300 meters away from the first peak. It was the first peak's Sword Sun's cave abode, and it was not far from the Peak Master's cave abode. From this, one could see Su Qilin's status in the first peak. However, to everyone's disappointment, the stone door of the cave abode was tightly shut. There was no reaction at all, as if no one was inside. What's going on? This life and death agreement has been spread for many days, and Su Qilin has accepted it. Now that Yi Wuxiang's sword invitation is here, logically speaking, Su Qilin should have reacted. Could it be that Su Qilin is afraid of fighting? A few seconds later, the quiet crowd exploded into an uproar. Countless people could not hold back the doubts in their hearts and started whispering to each other. Yi Wuxiang. Right at this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded out from the crowd. Eldest senior brother has yet to return. If you really want to challenge him, why don't you let me, Zhuo Dengfeng, seek his guidance? As soon as he finished speaking, a sword gleam soared into the sky, and a powerful aura rippled out between heaven and earth. When the sword gleam descended, a young man in white appeared. The young man's aura was completely revealed, and he did not conceal his killing intent at all. It's the First Peak's second senior brother, Zhuo Dengfeng. Why did this person appear at this time? With the appearance of this person, the originally quiet crowd gradually became noisy. The Sword Sect's First Peak should have 8 disciples, and Su Qilin was ranked first. Below him was Zhuo Dengfeng. Someone chuckled. I'm afraid you guys don't know this. 2 months ago, Zhuo Dengfeng went to the 9th peak to challenge Yi Wushuang. In the end, he almost died under Yi Wushuang's sword. As soon as he said that, everyone present came to a realization. Turned out that Zhuo Dengfeng held a grudge against Yi Wushuang because of his previous defeat. Yi Wushuang, I was defeated by you last time because I'm not as skilled as you. Hearing the whispers below, Zhuo Dengfeng's expression was extremely terrible. He sized Yi Wushuang up coldly. However, I've improved in the past 2 months. Do you dare to fight me? Before Yi Wushuang entered the Sword Sect, Su Qilin was the number 1 person in the younger generation, and Zhuo Dengfeng was number 2. However, after Yi Wushuang arrived and his reputation rose, many people faintly regarded him as the second most powerful person in the younger generation of the Sword Sect. Naturally, Zhuo Dengfeng was displeased. That was why he went to the 9th peak to prove himself. However, he did not expect to lose to Yi Wushuang. That was his humiliation for the past 2 months. Zhuo! Before Yi Wushuang could speak, a sneer came from afar. You're just a defeated opponent of youngest junior brother. What right do you have to challenge him? Why don't you let me play with you? In the next moment, a few sword gleams flashed over. The person in the lead was wearing the 9th peak's uniform. It was the 9th peak's eldest senior brother Gu Quan. Behind him were Hua Ling and the rest. Zhuo Dengfeng smiled disdainfully. Gu Quan, a piece of trash like you dares to challenge me? Aren't you also a piece of trash in youngest junior brother's eyes? Gu Quan did not want to be outdone and retorted, since we're both trash, why do you need to criticize me? You! Zhuo Dengfeng was furious. Youngest junior brother, don't agree to this guy's request. Gu Quan smirked coldly and looked up at Yi Wushuang. He wants to exhaust you in advance so that you won't be able to unleash your full strength in the upcoming battle. A hint of panic flashed through Zhuo Dengfeng's eyes when he heard that, but he quickly hid it. What? Don't tell me you don't dare? If you don't even dare to accept my challenge, what right do you have to challenge eldest senior brother? As soon as he finished speaking, many disciples of the First Peak immediately laughed out loud. Senior brother Zhuo is right. Yi Wushuang, you don't even dare to accept senior brother's challenge. What right do you have to challenge eldest senior brother? Hurry up and go back to your 9th peak to sleep. Everyone says that the 9th peak has always been incomparably cowardly and spineless. Now that I've seen it today, it really lives up to its reputation. For a moment, several extremely discordant laughter resounded throughout the arena. When the ridicule entered the ears of Gu Quan and the rest, it was as if a knife was stabbing their hearts. At that moment, Yi Wushuang, who had been silent all this while, slowly said, I'll accept it. Youngest junior brother, you. Gu Quan's expression changed. Without waiting for him to speak, Zhuo Dengfeng immediately smiled and said, All right, since that's the case, let's go to the arena. With that, he was about to fly to the stone platform that had already been built in the air. However, a cold voice immediately rang out, No need, I can kill you here. Zhuo Dengfeng suddenly turned around. What greeted him was a sword gleam descending. Sword intent whistled and landed on his body in an instant. Boom! The entire void shook, as if the entire world was trembling in that instant. A bloody mist exploded. Zhuo Dengfeng's body suddenly collapsed, and his soul was forcefully crushed by the whistling sword chi storm. At that moment, a gentle breeze blew over, scattering the stench of blood to every corner of the world. At that moment, the originally noisy ground suddenly became completely silent. Everyone looked at the white-clothed figure with shock in their eyes. A pseudo-emperor stage genius was killed in the blink of an eye. Even his soul didn't manage to escape? Whoosh! A few seconds later, the ground was in an uproar. Senior Brother Zwa. When the rest of the first peak disciples reacted, they immediately glared at Yi Wuxiang with hatred and fear. Too powerful. Zhuodongfeng's strength was ranked second among the first peak disciples, but he was killed just like that. Impudent. On the Lotus platform, the first peak's peak master, Old Man Mysterious Sword, was instantly enraged. Yi Wuxiang, how dare you? This person overestimated himself and challenged me. He deserves to die. Wuxiang doesn't know why he's so bold. A piece of trash like him, who can't even take a single strike from me, will only waste the sect's resources if he stays in this world. Yi Wuxiang's expression was like a 1,000-year-old cold pond, calm and composed. Moreover, those who insult my ninth peak will die. Those who enter my ninth peak will die. These 7 words that seemed to be short and calm, however, revealed an extreme killing intent. This killing intent caused the hearts of everyone present to tremble. Those who insult your ninth peak will die. Yi Wuxiang, how dare you? Rumble. A deafening voice suddenly exploded in the air. It was cold and dignified, as if it belonged to a high and mighty emperor. Invincible, unparalleled. He ruled the world and was as dignified as an immortal. Chapter 880. Almost at the same instant that the voice was heard. This voice was extremely familiar to all the disciples of the first peak and even the entire sword sect. Eldest senior brother. It's eldest senior brother's voice. Eldest senior brother is back. All of a sudden, countless cheers resounded in the surroundings. Countless sword sect disciples stood up in unison, and their eyes were filled with fanaticism as if they wanted to prostrate themselves in worship. What? Su Qilin is back? At this moment, the tens of thousands of people present all raised their heads and looked in the direction of the voice, as if they wanted to find the owner of the voice. Su Qilin, the most mysterious sword son of the sword sect's first peak, who was known as the number 1 among the 10 supreme paragons of the Kunlun ruins, had finally appeared? Yi Wuxiang's expression turned slightly cold as his gaze suddenly shot towards the sky above the arena. Boom! Sure enough, a loud sound suddenly came from that direction. A large area of space split open, and countless strands of purple energy slowly surged out. A tall figure stepped out from within. He was like the reincarnation of a god, like a heavenly emperor that had descended. Behind him, there was a 30-meter-tall purple Qilin shadow that towered into the sky, as if it wanted to shatter this world with a roar. Powerful, too powerful! Is he the elusive sword son of the sword sect's first peak? He's even more dignified than the rumors. In that instant, the hearts of countless people present started thumping uncontrollably under the pressure of this aura. It was shock, disbelief, excitement, respect, and even more so endless pressure. It was as if they could not have any disrespectful thoughts in front of this person. Under everyone's gazes, the purple figure finally revealed its true face. It was a young man in his early 20s. He had a godlike temperament, sharp facial features, and a pair of eyes that were as dignified as a god's. His hands were behind his back, and his back was straight. He was like a spear that wanted to pierce through this world. With his appearance, the people present immediately felt a wave of unparalleled and vast majesty. It was majesty, not pressure. In the face of such majesty, many people with low cultivation bases wanted to kneel and worship him from the bottom of their hearts. At that moment, Elder Mysterious Sword and Elder Heaven Sword stood up at the same time. There was a hint of flattery in their voices. Qilin, you're finally back. Even Ling Xuanzi, the sword sect master, took the initiative to nod at Su Qilin. It was a stark contrast to the way Yi Wuxuang was ignored when he arrived. Su Qilin nodded lightly. His penetrating eyes landed on Yi Wuxuang. Yi Wuxuang, how dare you? 2 months ago, you killed the 8th Peak's sword son and crippled the 7th Peak's sword son with a single strike. On account of our friendship as fellow disciples, I only took your sword and suppressed you. I had hoped that you would take this as a warning and reflect on your mistakes behind closed doors. Who would have thought that you would kill your fellow disciples here today? His voice suddenly resounded. Today, I've returned, and I'll definitely purge everything. All of you kneel. Boom! His voice was as mighty as heaven's might, forming an invisible storm that pressed down on Yi Wuxuang and the rest. Plop, poo! At that moment, Gu Quan and the rest behind Yi Wuxuang were the first to kneel on one knee. Blood spurted from their mouths, and they were practically covered in blood. The people below were dead silent. Only the people from the first peak were proud. This was Su Qilin. This was the sword son of the sword sect's first peak. In the sword sect, he was no different from an emperor. No one dared to refute his words, and the entire sect supported his decisions. You want me to kneel? Yi Wuxuang's sword swept across the sky, and his sword intent covered the sky, forming a storm of sword intent that protected Gu Quan and the other two. I once suppressed 10,000 worlds and slaughtered billions of stars. Even heaven and earth could not suppress me. What right do you have to make me kneel? As Su Qilin muttered in surprise, I didn't expect you to be so relaxed under my might in just 2 months. No wonder you dared to come. It's useless to say all this. Yi Wuxuang took a step forward. His sword intent soared into the sky and whistled coldly. Today, either you die or I die. I thought that your talent was not bad, so I wanted to leave a talent for the sect. Since you insist on dying, I can only fulfill your wish. Su Qilin also took a step forward, and the two of them turned into sword gleams that shot towards the huge arena in the sky. At that moment, everyone's gazes were focused on the arena, and their eyes were filled with excitement. Whether it was Su Qilin or Yi Wuxuang, any one of them would be a rare talent in the Kunlun ruins. However, today they were going to fight to the death. Thinking to this point, a portion of them subconsciously looked at the figures on the 3 lotus platforms. They saw Old Man Mysterious Sword and Elder Heaven's Sword with cold expressions. On the other hand, the sword sect master, Ling Xuanzi, was expressionless, and no one could see any emotion on his face. It was as if the upcoming battle had nothing to do with him. Hualing gripped Gu Quan's arm tightly, and her pretty face was extremely pale. Eldest senior brother, youngest junior brother. Gu Quan sighed softly. Respect youngest junior brother's decision. If youngest junior brother's elder brother was here, he might be able to stop all of this. Hualing bit her lip and said weakly. However, she regretted it the moment she said that. She felt that it was impossible. After all, 2 supreme giants had already gone to look for Yichen before this. Boom! On the huge arena, 2 extremely terrifying sword chi storms condensed out of thin air. That might cause the expressions of countless people to change. They felt as if their bodies were about to be torn apart. At that moment, Yi Wuxuang and Su Qilin were 30 meters apart, facing each other from afar. Although they did not move, the sword chi storms between them had already clashed countless times. One of the sect masters sucked in a breath of cold air and said slowly, "Everyone, who do you think will win and who will die today?" His words immediately attracted everyone's attention. For a moment, many people pricked up their ears. It's hard to say. One of the powerhouses frowned slightly as his gaze landed on Yi Wuxuang and Su Qilin. These two are geniuses that are hard to come by in 1,000 years. Among them, Su Qilin is the most mysterious. It's said that he was born in the secular world. When he was born, there was a phenomenon in the sky, and a Qilin came walking on cloud. He said slowly, Qilin is also known as the symbol of a saint, so Su Qilin is known as the reincarnation of a saint. He entered the sword sect's first peak since he was young and was even taken in as the direct disciple of the sword sect's sect master. As for Yi Wushuang, he's the most dazzling genius in the Kunlun ruins in the past 6 months. He possesses one of the 10 great sword bodies, the indestructible sword body. At this point, he paused for a moment before continuing, especially since this brat killed a pseudo-emperor in an instant. From this, it can be seen that his strength has at least reached the emperor stage in the past 2 months. He might even be infinitely close to a supreme giant. Boom! At this moment, the 2 figures on the arena finally moved. As the sword shadows in their hands erupted, the 2 of them charged towards each other. The moment he saw the long sword in Yi Wushuang's hand, the expression of a boy on the Dao sect's seat changed slightly. The expression of a boy on the Dao sect's seat changed slightly. He immediately whispered to the Dao sect's giant in front of him, "Grandmaster, that sword looks familiar. P.S. There are only 3 chapters today. It's not easy to write about battles. Please forgive me. Su Qilin has an extraordinary background and is an important figure. It's impossible for Yi Wushuang to kill him instantly. Moreover, Yi Wushuang is only the reincarnation of the Heavenly Emperor Sword's sword spirit." Chapter 881. The gigantic arena floated in the sky. On the arena, there was a battle platform condensed from boundless origin energy. It surged with the light of a formation, and from afar, it looked like it had materialized. Under everyone's gaze, the 2 figures on the arena turned into 2 figures and flashed towards each other. Boom! A huge storm of sword chi completely erupted on the arena. The terrifying might made people worry if the arena could withstand it. A bone-chilling killing intent enveloped the sky, and it was as if the temperature of the world had suddenly dropped by dozens of degrees. At this moment, almost everyone's eyes were fixed on the 2 figures in the sky. They all knew that the battle between these 2 geniuses was a tit for tat. As the saying went, when 2 tigers fought, one would definitely be injured. When a boy on the Dao sect's seats saw the long sword in Yi Wushuang's hand, he immediately went forward and whispered to the Daoist priest in front of him, "Grandmaster, that sword looks familiar." The Daoist priest's gaze then landed on the long sword in Yi Wushuang's hand, and his pupils constricted. Wasn't this sword taken away by someone? How did it appear in this brat's hands? To the 10 high sects there was a humiliation. It was the person who had taken away Yi Wushuang's sword and killed the supreme paragons of the 10 high sects outside Border Dragon City. The 10 high sects had tried everything they could, but they could not find out the identity of the man in the conical hat. Unexpectedly, the sword that the other party had taken away had appeared in Yi Wushuang's hands. Could it be that the person wearing the conical hat that day was this brat? The Daoist priest took a deep look at Yi Wushuang, and a cold smile appeared on his old face. Great Yi Wushuang! How dare he play a double game under the nose of the 10 high sects? In the arena, Su Qilin stood in the air, his figure turning into dozens of afterimages, making it difficult for others to catch him. Boom! With a wave of his hand, a sword gleam bloomed in his hand. Then, like lightning, it slashed at Yi Wushuang with a sharp sound. In just an instant, the sword gleam landed in front of Yi Wushuang. Under this shocking sword gleam, the surrounding space faintly distorted. But almost at the same time, sword intent exploded from Yi Wushuang's body. Majestic sword chi surrounded him, forming a terrifying sword chi storm with him as the center. Just as the sword light was about to hit him, he moved. His cold eyes looked at the sword light that was slashing at him. In the depths of his star-like eyes, a bright sword light shadow appeared, exuding a vast emperor's might. Bang! As the sword light in his eyes flickered, Su Qilin's sword light suddenly shattered. Hua! Everyone who had been paying attention to the battle cried out in surprise when they saw this scene. Many people felt that the sword gleam that Su Qilin had slashed over had collapsed before they even saw Yi Wushuang attack. The expression of Sword Sect's first peak's peak master, Old Man Mysterious Sword, changed. He seemed to have thought of something. This is a sword intent attack. As soon as he finished speaking, all the members of the Sword Sect present here were astounded. Sword intent attack, as the name suggested, could be used to fight the enemy. At this stage, sword cultivators were no longer limited to weapons. To them, every flower, every blade of grass, every tree, and anything in this world, including their own consciousness, was a weapon. As for the path of sword cultivation, it was divided into sword gleams, sword chi threads, comprehension of sword intent, and sword intent. After that, it was sword intent attack. There were over 10,000 people in the entire sword sect, and most of them were still at the stage of sword chi thread. Only an extremely small number of elites could reach the stage of sword intent release. As for sword intent attack, in the entire sword sect, only the sword sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi, could achieve this. Even the few supreme giants in the sect could not do it. That was why the sword sect's first peak's peak master, Old Man Mysterious Sword, turned pale when he saw Yi Wushuang silently break Su Qilin's sword gleam. As soon as he said that, all the sword sect disciples looked at Yi Wushuang in a different way. Even the sword sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi, who was sitting on the lotus platform, had a ripple in his eyes. Under countless gazes, Yi Wushuang's white robe fluttered without any wind, and the sword gleam in his eyes flickered a few more times. An invisible sword intent swayed lightly, and it seemed to tear through space and time as it slashed towards Su Qilin. Su Qilin's heart trembled. He suddenly had a feeling that his perception seemed to have lost its effect at that moment. Whoosh! It was this brief moment of absent-mindedness that allowed the invisible sword intent to approach him. Su Qilin calmly dodged to the side. A gentle breeze blew past his face, followed by a strand of long hair that fluttered in the breeze. Looking at this scene, the entire first peak seemed to be silent at this moment. Their eyes were filled with shock. Su Qilin actually lost a strand of his long hair under Yi Wushuang's sword intent attack? If his reaction had been a moment slower, wouldn't it be, this little bastard actually comprehended a sword intent attack? The first peak's peak master, Old Man Mysterious Sword, did not hide the envy and jealousy on his face. In his opinion, the reason why Yi Wushuang was able to defeat Su Qilin was entirely because of the strange and unpredictable sword intent attack that could be touched but not touched. Good, very good. Looks like you've improved a lot in the past 2 months. Su Qilin gently stroked his temples, and the indifference on his face immediately vanished. When he looked at Yi Wushuang again, there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. 2 months ago, he had single-handedly suppressed this young man in white. He did not expect him to grow to such an extent in just 2 months. If he was allowed to continue growing, his future could be imagined. Thinking to this point, a trace of killing intent truly arose in his heart. Violet Sun Sword. A long roar shook the world, and a sword gleam suddenly bloomed from between Su Qilin's brows. In the end, the sword gleam landed in Su Qilin's hand and turned into a long sword. The long sword swallowed and spat out purple energy. It was only 3 feet long, but it was like a purple dragon spiraling in his hand. The moment he saw the sword, the Taoist from Tao sect stood up in shock. What sword is this? There's actually so much purple energy on it? I've never seen this sword before. This sword must be a legendary spirit treasure. At this moment, countless powerhouses stood up one after another. The Devil Sect's powerhouse's expression also changed. He stared fixedly at the long sword with a trace of bewilderment in his eyes. Almost at that instant, the sword sect's 9th peak. The figure sitting on the cold spring suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze was like lightning as he shot straight at the first peak. Looks like I'm right. This kid is the one from 500 years ago. Chapter 882. In the arena. At this moment, Su Qilin held the Violet Sun sword in his hand, and his aura suddenly changed, causing him to feel as if an ancient sword immortal had descended. The tens of thousands of people present were shocked by his aura. Even the leaders of the 10 high sects were no exception. Their gazes were still fixed on the violet sun sword in his hand. What no one noticed was that on the 3 lotus platforms in the sky, the first peak's peak master, Old Man Mysterious Sword, and Elder Heaven Sword, looked at Su Qilin with even more reverence. On the other hand, the Sword Sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi's eyes shone brightly. Yi Wushuang. A voice that sounded like heavenly might resounded throughout the entire first peak. I have to say, you've really surprised me. I have to admit that I've underestimated you. Su Qilin stood against the wind, aloof from the world, and his sword intense soared into the sky. However, no matter how monstrous you are, no matter how much of a genius you are, you're no match for me. His decibel suddenly increased by countless times, and it was like a thunderclap that exploded in the clouds, because I'm a saint. I was born to rule the world, and I'm destined to unify the Kunlun ruins and suppress billions of people. Rumble, the entire world was filled with his dignified, cold, invincible, and unparalleled voice. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into an ancient emperor. Bastard! So this is the real Su Qilin. What ambition! Hearing such shameless words, countless people, including the 10 high sects, revealed angry expressions. Su Qilin's words that he wanted to unify the Kunlun ruins had truly provoked them. A powerhouse of the Devil sect glanced coldly at the Sword sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi, and said with a fake smile, "Sect Master Ling, your Sword sect has really nurtured a good disciple." Facing his hostility, Ling Xuanzi's expression remained calm from the beginning to the end. He merely smiled faintly. It's normal for a young man to be proud and arrogant. Brother Ing, why do you have to mind a junior? Humph! The powerhouse of the Devil sect snorted coldly. Yi Wushuang's expression did not change when he heard Su Qilin's arrogant words. He said coldly, "Your Chunibu syndrome has reached the late stage." In the arena, Su Qilin stood in the air, allowing the countless gazes below to gather on him. However, his gloomy gaze was fixed on Yi Wushuang. The talent displayed by the latter had already threatened him, and it had already caused him to take the latter seriously, causing his killing intent to surge. After I kill you, I'll see who else in the Sword sect dares to disobey me. I'll see who else in the Kunlun ruins can stop me. Killing intent surged explosively within Su Qilin's eyes as the violet sun sword in his hand shook. Instantly, numerous sword insight that were almost material swept out like a storm and suffused the entire arena. As soon as this aura appeared, it attracted countless exclamations of shock. Even the leaders of the 10 high sects felt an extreme pressure at this moment. What a powerful aura! Su Qilin's aura has probably already stepped into the Emperor realm, right? I didn't expect this brat to have achieved this at such a young age. As expected of the number 1 among the 10 supreme paragons of the Kunlun ruins. Yeah, with his current strength, he's completely comparable to a supreme giant, right? If he's given more time. Hearing the uncontrollable exclamations of surprise, Yi Wushuang's expression was still as cold as ice that would not melt for 1,000 years. Whoosh whoosh! He suddenly moved like lightning, and the sword in his hand moved as well. The sword insight on his body converged into the long sword in his hand. Then, he swung his sword. The sword was like rain, and the sword gleams were like the stars in the night sky. Meanwhile, a meteor shower suddenly descended in the space where Su Qilin was. You're courting death. Sensing the shocking attack, Su Qilin's gaze was dark as he swept out with an extremely simple sword strike. The sword strike seemed simple, but it contained endless variations. It first annihilated all the surrounding sword insight before slashing towards Yi Wushuang. Crack, 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 the origin chi that filled the sky was immediately shattered by the sword, and a crack was forcefully formed in the surrounding space by the sword. Such destructive power caused everyone's hearts to tremble. Yi Wushuang was dressed in white. He raised his eyes slightly and looked at the enormous sword shadow that was surging over like an ocean. Then, he took a step forward. He swung his sword. One strike, just one strike. However, this strike displayed his understanding of the sword Dao as the sword sect's ninth peak's sword sun. One strike to break all techniques, one strike to slay all qi, one strike to subdue all demons, one strike to subdue all immortals, one strike to suppress all worlds. Boom! A deafening explosion resounded in the arena, and it was as if even the arena set up by the supreme giants of the sword sect was unable to endure it. Following that, streaks of incomparably violent and majestic energy ripples swept out in all directions. On the chaotic arena, a white robe tore through the dust at lightning speed. A ferocious sword gleam mercilessly attacked Su Qilin. A chill shot out from Su Qilin's eyes, but he did not retreat at all. Instead, he took a step forward and sword gleams filled the sky. Every single sword gleam was enough to kill a pseudo-emperor on the spot. Ding, ding, ding. In an instant, figures intersected on the arena as sword gleams whistled. Under the gazes of tens of thousands of people, the two figures exchanged dozens of blows in the span of a breath. Both sides' attacks were exceptionally ferocious. An ear-piercing sound spread out like thunder, and the energy fluctuations it emitted caused everyone's hearts to palpitate. Most of the people present were extremely shocked by such an earth-shattering battle. The strength of the two of them could no longer be described as sect disciples. They had already risen to the level of supreme giants. This was especially so for the disciples of the sword sect's first peak. At this moment, their expressions were extremely unnatural. They had always been proud of the first peak and looked down on the ninth peak, including Yi Wushuang. However, at that moment, the sword son of the ninth peak was locked in battle with the legend in their hearts. Rumble, violent origin energy completely exploded on the arena, forcefully compressing the air within a radius of 300 meters. It was as if mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking, rumbling endlessly. Bang! Under countless gazes, as the strong wind dissipated, the two figures each took hundreds of steps back on the arena before stabilizing themselves. In such a ferocious and terrifying confrontation, the two of them were actually on par with each other. At this moment, the spectators below all looked at the white-clothed figure in shock. Obviously, they did not expect him to be able to fight Su Qilin head-on without being at a disadvantage. Under the numerous gazes, Yi Wushuang slowly raised his head to look at Su Qilin and enunciated word by word. I know that you're not cultivating the sword sect's inheritance, and you're not good at the sword Dao. You don't have to hide it anymore. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't have the chance. Chapter 883. Following Yi Wushuang's words, the atmosphere of the entire first peak was pushed to its peak. What? Su Qilin doesn't really cultivate the sword sect's inheritance? Could it be that he has another inheritance? From what Yi Wushuang said, Su Qilin isn't good at sword Dao. I'm afraid he really has another inheritance. The sword sect is one of the supreme sects in the Kunlun ruins. Countless people covet its inheritance, yet Su Qilin actually didn't cultivate it? In an instant, countless cries came from the mouths of over 10,000 people. Their gazes were filled with disbelief as they looked at Su Qilin, the sword sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi, and the others. Compared to everyone's shock, the sword sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi, and the other two looked indifferent. They were not surprised at all, as if they had known about it since long ago. Under everyone's gaze, Su Qilin's expression kept changing, and his pupils that were looking at Yi Wushuang constricted violently. The difference between the current Yi Wushuang and the one from 2 months ago was simply too great. If he did not use his true strength, he might really die on the spot. Thinking up to this point, a red glow flashed through Su Qilin's eyes. After taking a deep breath in, he smiled sinisterly. Yi Wushuang, congratulations, you've guessed correctly. I'm indeed not cultivating the sword sect's inheritance. As soon as he said that, his body suddenly trembled. At this moment, all the spiritual energy within a radius of 300 meters gathered towards him. At the same time, a powerful pressure swept out from his body and quickly spread towards the heavens and the earth. At this moment, countless powerhouses stood up in shock. They looked at Su Qilin in shock as they sensed the explosive spiritual energy in the latter's body. Someone exclaimed, he's a spell master, and he's a nirvana stage cultivator. Following his words, the world fell into a dead silence. As a cultivation holy land, the Kunlun ruins also possessed two complete systems. They were ancient martial artists and spell masters. The former polished the potential of the human body, while the latter breathed and cultivated divinity. The stages of spell masters were Tao entry, mystic enlightenment, and origin energy. However, there was another stage above origin energy, which was the nirvana stage that most spell masters did not know about. Nirvana was a term used in Buddhism. In Buddhism, it meant inaction, freedom, immortality, and so on. However, this nirvana wasn't the nirvana of the profound practitioners. The nirvana of the profound practitioners referred to the cultivators breaking through the limitations of the human body and giving birth to the true spirit embryo divine treasure. As the saying went, as long as the spirit embryo was indestructible, the consciousness would exist forever. After the spirit embryo divine treasure was born, spell masters would be able to use their spells and divine arts as easily as if they were real immortals. Most importantly, once they stepped into the nirvana realm, their lifespan would increase by 500 years. In the entire Kunlun ruins, only the Tao sect master Lei Xing, the devil sect's overlord Ing Xiangtian, and the ghoul sect's master were nirvana stage powerhouses. From this, it could be seen how difficult it was for spell masters to step into the rebirth realm. However, Su Qilin had stepped into the rebirth realm at such a young age, so how could this not cause everyone to be extremely shocked? Amidst the deathly silence, Su Qilin looked down at everyone from high above, and he took in everyone's reactions. He looked at Yi Wushuang coldly again. Yi Wushuang, I'm an Emperor stage sword cultivator, but I'm actually a Nirvana stage cultivator. Are you surprised? Yi Wushuang remained silent with a calm expression. You're just a pseudo-Emperor stage cultivator. Even if we fought to a draw earlier, what about now? Su Qilin had a mocking expression as he looked at Yi Wushuang like a cat looking at a mouse. I'll give you a chance now. As long as you kneel down to me in public and cripple your cultivation, I might consider sparing your life. So what? Yi Wushuang's eyes were clear. Your Tao is heavy but not refined, and your thoughts are mixed but not clear. You'll definitely die today. Humph. Su Qilin snorted coldly, and his expression turned even gloomier. His hands changed, and then he opened his mouth, and a red glow shot out from it. As soon as the red glow appeared, it immediately expanded in the wind and instantly turned into a red flag. Mysterious light flowed on the huge red flag, and an extremely breathtaking power swept out from it. Is that a spirit treasure? The moment the red flag appeared, the expressions of the people from the 10 high sects changed, and a trace of shock flashed through their eyes. The so-called spirit treasure was an item refined by a nirvana stage cultivator. It could unleash monstrous divine ability power. Most importantly, spirit treasures possessed spirituality, and they could fight according to their master's will. Even in the Kunlun ruins, such a spiritual item was in existence that countless people would covet. Even the sword sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi, and the other two on the 3 lotus seats in the sky looked at Su Qilin with shock in their eyes. Before this, they had never heard Su Qilin mention it, nor had they seen him possess a spirit treasure. Forget it, let me experience the might of a spirit treasure. Seeing that Yi Wushuang's expression did not change, Su Qilin smirked coldly. Then, he formed a seal with both hands, and a finger seal immediately shot into the red flag. Boom! the red flag immediately fell into his hand. Fire virtue has a spirit, listen to my command. Su Qilan's expression was ice-cold. His seal changed, and he suddenly shouted in a low voice. A huge wave of fire erupted from the red flag in his hand. As soon as the wave of fire appeared, the surrounding space began to evaporate rapidly. In the end, it actually formed a hollow space beside him. Su Qilan held the flagpole and waved it. The huge wave of fire immediately shot towards Yi Wuxiang like a roaring fire dragon like lightning. This was the might of a spirit treasure. Child's play. Yi Wuxiang's gaze turned cold. He suddenly swung his sword, and hundreds of sword shadows instantly erupted in the air. The sword shadows whistled as they slashed fiercely at the huge fire dragon that was charging over. Rumble, following a series of loud noises, the hundreds of swords actually forcefully annihilated the huge fire dragon. Humph! I'd like to see how long you can last. Su Qilan's gaze was cold. After taking a deep breath in, he formed a seal with his fingers and waved the red flag again. Su Qilan, do you think you're the only one hiding? Right at this moment, Yi Wuxiang did not retreat. Instead, he took a step forward. At this step, everyone was shocked to discover that the origin energy between heaven and earth suddenly began to boil. Then, they all whistled over and surged into Yi Wuxiang's body from all directions. Emperor's stage, break. Yi Wuxiang let out a long roar, and a loud boom reverberated in all directions. The might actually caused many people to spit blood and be thrown back. At the next moment, the aura in Yi Wuxiang's body rose rapidly. Pseudo-emperor, peak pseudo-emperor, and finally, he stepped into the door of the emperor's stage that troubled countless people. Rumble, thunderclouds suddenly gathered in the sky. The lightning in the entire Kunlun ruins seemed to connect, as if the heavens were angry and the people were resentful. Is this the Emperor Tribulation? At this moment, countless people were shocked as they looked at the phenomenon in the sky. He actually chose to break through at this time? Chapter 884. Rumble, silver snakes flowed through the monstrous thunderclouds. The heavenly might that was emitted caused everyone to tremble. Yi Wuxiang was dressed in white as he stood under the thunderclouds. His expression did not change, and the sword intent on his body became stronger and stronger. In the end, it shot straight into the clouds. Rumble, sensing the provocation of his sword intent, the thunderclouds in the sky became even larger. They rumbled incessantly as if the heavens were enraged. He's deliberately expanding the lightning tribulation. Does he have a death wish? Crazy, this kid is really crazy. At this moment, the people below all cried out in shock. Ordinary people would always avoid lightning tribulations. After all, it was heavenly might. No matter how strong a person was, how could they defeat heavenly might? Therefore, even if someone wanted to step into the Emperor stage, they would choose a place that no one knew and secretly pass the Emperor stage. However, Yi Wuxiang chose to break through during the battle. He even deliberately released his sword intent to provoke the heavenly might. How could they not be horrified by this? Amidst the rumbling thunder, Yi Wuxiang looked at Su Qilan from afar. Su Qilan, you call yourself a saint. Since that's the case, do you dare to fight me under the lightning tribulation? No matter how calm he was, Su Qilan could no longer keep a straight face when he faced the thunderclouds in the sky. Lunatic, you lunatic. There's no one who cultivates the sword who isn't a lunatic. However, Yi Wuxiang smiled. Under everyone's gaze, not only did he ignore the thunderclouds above his head, he even charged at Su Qilan with his sword in hand. Rumble, a bolt of lightning as thick as a baby's arm descended from the sky and accurately struck Yi Wuxiang. However, Yi Wuxiang's body was not as crispy as everyone had imagined. He merely paused for a moment before continuing to charge at Su Qilan. Let's fight. Yi Wuxiang's eyes were as deep as the night sky. An illusory yet real sword shadow appeared in the depths of his eyes again. The sword shadow was blurry, as if it was isolated from time and space. As the sword shadow trembled, an invisible sword intent rushed towards Su Qilin. Su Qilin waved the red flag in his hand, and it immediately faced the invisible sword intent. Bang! The invisible sword intent immediately collapsed. At this moment, Yi Wushuang had already closed in. The sword slashed out. A dazzling sword light flashed like a thunderbolt. It was so dazzling, so resplendent, as if it wanted to destroy the world. Get lost. Su Qilin brandished the purple sun sword and slashed out. Boundless sword aura wreaked havoc between heaven and earth in an incomparably domineering manner. Their swords clashed. Boom! At that moment, another bolt of lightning descended from the sky and struck Yi Wushuang first. The lightning that entered his body followed their swords and entered Su Qilin's body. Boom! The two of them were instantly enveloped by the blinding lightning, and the incomparably violent lightning tore their bodies apart. The next moment, under everyone's watchful eyes, two extremely miserable figures were sent flying, and in the end, they crashed heavily around the arena. Pooh! Su Qilin couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His elegant long hair was completely blasted apart, and a shocking sword mark appeared on his chest. Fresh blood gurgled out. There was blood at the corner of Yi Wushuang's lips after he finally stabilized himself. There were spots of blood on his white clothes that were turning red. Clearly, he was injured. Whoosh! The spectators below were in an uproar. Their eyes were filled with shock as they looked at the two figures in the arena. The battle between the two of them was simply too brutal. Especially Yi Wushuang. He still chose to attack Su Qilin without fear of death under the Emperor Tribulation. What shocked them the most was that Su Qilin was even injured. On the 3 lotus platforms in the sky, the expression of the first Peak's Peak Master, Old Man Mysterious Sword, changed. He immediately raised his head to look at the Sword Sect Master, Ling Xuanzi. Sect Master, I think we should order them to stop. However, Ling Xuanzi did not say a word. His gaze remained fixed on Su Qilin and Yi Wushuang, as if he did not hear anything. Sect Master, Qilin is injured. Quickly get them to stop, and then I'll kill Yi Wushuang. Even Elder Heaven's Sword spoke up. Yi Wushuang's monstrousness had truly exceeded all of their expectations. At this moment, they were really afraid that Su Qilin would die. However, Ling Xuanzi still remained silent. Old Man Mysterious Sword snorted coldly. He was about to stand up and stop them, but he realized that an incomparably majestic force had restrained him. He could not help but look at Ling Xuanzi, his eyes filled with confusion. Let them continue. Ling Xuanzi's eyes were like a glacier that would not melt for 10,000 years. No one is allowed to interfere, otherwise, Sect Master, don't forget Qilin. Old Man Mysterious Sword's expression changed, and he hinted intentionally or unintentionally. Shut up. Ling Xuanzi's face darkened as he stared fixedly at Yi Wushuang in the arena. A strange arc flashed through his eyes. You're actually not afraid of lightning. Let me see what other tricks you have. In the dead silence. Be bastard. Su Qilin struggled to stand up from the ground. His face was no longer as handsome as before, and his eyes were bloodshot. I am going to kill you. His body twitched slightly, and his gaze at Yi Wushuang was filled with resentment and extreme killing intent. He had never been injured before, but he was injured by Yi Wushuang today. To him, this was a humiliation. This paragon had finally gone mad. In the next moment, he clasped his hands together and quickly formed a strange seal. Then, he slapped it heavily on his glabella. As the seal changed, a purple glow slowly bloomed from the depths of his glabella. The purple glow grew larger and larger, and in the end, it actually turned into a purple mark. Boom! The purple mark ignited with a loud bang. At this moment, the Taoist priest on the Tao sect's seats suddenly spoke, and a slightly sharp voice rang out. He wants to sacrifice his spirit embryo. The spirit embryo was the sign of a spell master stepping into the nirvana stage. It contained all the divine treasures of a spell master. Once it was sacrificed, it would definitely drop in cultivation level. He did not expect Su Qilin to be forced to such a state by Yi Wushuang. He was willing to sacrifice his spirit embryo and drop in cultivation level to kill Yi Wushuang. He's actually willing to sacrifice his spirit embryo. Crazy, all of them are crazy. The expressions of the countless powerhouses below changed drastically as well. As the purple mark burned, streams of blood-red aura immediately surged into Su Qilin's body. Su Qilin's figure also expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it actually expanded to more than 3 meters tall. The terrifying aura emitted from it caused even some of the supreme powerhouses present to feel their hearts palpitate. At this moment, Su Qilin could kill supreme powerhouses. Chapter 885. Ha ha ha! Su Qilin roared at the sky. His disheveled hair made him look like a ferocious ghost. Yi Wushuang, I told you that you're no match for me. Only I can laugh until the end. It's time to end this. As soon as he said that, he stretched out his finger and pointed at Yi Wushuang from afar. The killing intent in his eyes almost materialized. Bone-corroding demonic finger. When his finger fell, the world seemed to darken in an instant. At the next moment, a black beam of light that was about 60 meters long tore through space and enveloped Yi Wushuang like a ghostly hand that stretched out from hell. Sizzle, sizzle, wherever the gigantic black beam of light passed, there was no sound at all. A vacuum suddenly appeared in the space, and countless air was instantly annihilated. The might seemed to be able to pierce through heaven and earth. As for the spectators below, their expressions changed when they sensed the terrifying energy contained in the gigantic black beam of light. TSK, what a domineering finger! This finger can kill a supreme giant. Yi Wushuang is going to die. At this moment, almost everyone had determined Yi Wushuang's fate. There were no exceptions. Su Qilin was willing to sacrifice his spirit embryo to execute this finger, causing countless people to tremble in fear. The gigantic black pillar of light pierced through heaven and earth, charging straight at Yi Wushuang with an unavoidable momentum. Yi Wushuang's body seemed incomparably small under it. Yi Wushuang's handsome face gradually turned serious. Then, a hint of determination flashed across his face. Looks like I can only use this move, youngest junior brother. When Hua Ling saw this scene, she was so scared that she cried. She subconsciously wanted to charge forward, but she was stopped by Gu Quan. Youngest junior brother, the other people from the 9th peak almost fainted. Right at this moment, Yi Wushuang's body trembled violently. A bolt of lightning erupted from his body and tore through the sky. At the next moment, as everyone held their breaths, the white-clothed figure on the arena twisted a few times. In the end, it turned into a gigantic sword that could hold up the sky. The gigantic sword emitted a golden light that was dazzling. It was like a divine sword descending from the sky, buzzing non-stop. A peerless sword Qi, unyielding to fate and possessing a peerless emperor's might, soared into the sky, causing the sky to change color and the sun and moon to lose their brilliance. At that moment everyone was shocked, including the people from the 10 high sects and the people on the 3 lotus platforms in the sky. Even the expression of the sword sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi, who had never expressed his opinion from the beginning until the end, changed at this moment. A murmur quietly echoed between heaven and earth. The divine sword is like my heart, cut my blood to become a supreme sovereign. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the giant sword took the initiative to meet the huge black light beam. An unyielding sword light, like a meteor that flashed across the night sky, blossomed with a dazzling brilliance. The entire space violently trembled, as if an unparalleled will had mercilessly and domineeringly destroyed the black beam of light. The sword light did not slow down at all. It went straight through Su Qilin's body. after Su Qilin, who was like a god that had descended from the heavens, was pierced by the sword light, his body staggered. Then, he lowered his head and stared blankly at the bloody hole in his chest. The sword light destroyed his heart meridians and pierced through his heart. Endless sword intent covered his entire body. "I'm actually going to die." The Supreme Paragon revealed a trace of confusion in his eyes, and then he chuckled. He seemed to be in disbelief, indignation, and shock. Bang! His body fell heavily to the ground. At the same time, a sword light landed at the end of the arena. With a flash of light, the sword light dissipated, and a white-clothed figure slowly lay on the ground. He did not move at all, as if he was dead. The world was dead silent. No one spoke, and no one reacted. It was as if everything had stopped at that moment. After an unknown period of time, the white-clothed figure struggled to get up and staggered forward. In the end, he walked to the side of the body that had already turned cold. Almost at that instant, a purple bead floated out from the corpse, as if it wanted to shoot into the distance. However, at that moment a hand suddenly grabbed it. Su Qilin's terrified cry for help came from the purple bead. "Elder Mysterious Sword, Elder Heaven Sword, Sect Master, save me, save me." It was this voice that woke everyone up. "Bastard!" Two furious voices rang out from the 3 lotus platforms in the sky, and their voices were mixed with extreme shock. Elder Mysterious Sword stood up in shock and roared, "Yi Wushuang, hand over the Qilin's soul core. Yi Wushuang, you killed a fellow disciple. You deserve to die." Elder Heaven Sword's voice was like thunder, "Hurry up and hand over Su Qilin's soul core. Perhaps I can consider leaving your corpse intact." However, the white-clothed figure only looked at them quietly. His face was pale, and his body was trembling non-stop, as if he was at the end of his tether. However, he still held onto the purple soul core with all his might. He wanted to crush it. However, he realized that he did not have any strength left. He really wanted to lie down. However, the dignity of the victor did not allow him to do that. "How dare you!" Old Man Mysterious Sword let out a furious roar. He leaped up and immediately extended his hand towards Yi Wushuang from afar. Facing the huge hand that was reaching towards him, Yi Wushuang did not move at all. He did not have the strength to move. At that moment, a terrifying sword intent suddenly bloomed from the 9th peak that was 3,000 meters away. The sword intent tore through space and ruthlessly slashed at the huge hand. Elder Mysterious Sword grunted and looked at the 9th peak with an extremely gloomy expression. "Qing Xian, how dare you hurt me? Are you trying to rebel?" At the next moment, a sword gleam flashed over from the horizon. An old man in a green Taoist robe stepped on the sword gleam. His entire body emitted a terrifying sword intent, as if he was a peerless divine sword that had left its sheath. It was incomparably sharp. Elder Qing Xian, when they saw who it was, Gu Quan and the others, who had already lost all hope, were overjoyed. It was as if they had seen their savior. Taoist Elder Qing Xian landed on the arena and looked at the young man in front of him with a calm expression. He was clearly exhausted, but he was trying his best to maintain his dignity. A few seconds later, a faint sigh was heard. "Are you happy?" The young man in white did not say a word. Seeing that the other party was ignoring him, Old Man Mysterious Sword roared in the air, "Qing Xian, what's the meaning of this?" Taoist Elder Qing Xian stood proudly in the air and looked straight at Old Man Mysterious Sword and the other two. "Mysterious Sword, let me ask you, is this a life-and-death battle? Is it Su Qilin's will?" "Yes." Under his gaze, Old Man Mysterious Sword felt a little guilty. Then, he said unyieldingly, "So what? Since that's the case, you, a dignified senior of the sect, disregarded the rules and attacked a junior in front of so many outsiders." Elder Qing Xian's gaze was as sharp as an arrow. "Do you still want your face? You?" Old Man Mysterious Sword was instantly enraged. "Qing Xian, aren't you being a little too arrogant?" Elder Heaven's sword snorted coldly. Although it's a life-and-death battle, Su Qilin is a once-in-a-thousand-years genius of our sword sect after all. Yi Wushuang is from the same sect as him, yet he destroyed his body at every turn. Such actions are condemned by both humans and gods. I'm arrogant? Elder Qing Xian seemed to have heard something funny and sneered. Ever since the previous peak master of the ninth peak died, your first peak has led the way to suppress the ninth peak. You want to snatch resources from us, and you also want to snatch disciples from us. At that time, did you ever think that we were all from the same sect? When my ninth peak's useless disciple, Yi Wushuang, was suppressed by your first peak's Su Qilin, did any of you ever think that we were all from the same sect? Yi Wushuang challenged Su Qilin to a battle. In the eyes of outsiders, this is an unfair duel. All of you ignored it indifferently and even treated him coldly. At that time, did you ever think that we were all from the same sect? Taoist Master Qing Xian's 3 consecutive questions shook the entire sword sect, causing Elder Heaven Sword's face to turn pale and green. He did not know how to refute. Old Man Mysterious Sword snorted coldly and turned to look at Ling Xuanzi. Sect Master, you decide this matter. Under countless gazes, Ling Xuanzi's calm eyes slowly looked at Yi Wushuang. Give me Su Qilin's soul core. Old Man Mysterious Sword was overjoyed when he heard that, and then he sneered. Hearing this, countless people secretly shook their heads. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Ling Xuanzi had been biased from the beginning. Even though Yi Wushuang had revealed a stronger aptitude than Su Qilin, he still wanted to protect Su Qilin. Ah! Right at this moment, an incomparably desolate laughter rang out. The laughter revealed endless ridicule. Old Man Mysterious Sword said coldly, Qing Xian, what are you laughing at? Qing Xian looked straight at Ling Xuanzi and enunciated word by word. Sect Master, I'll ask you one last time. Do you really want Su Qilin's soul core? Ling Xuanzi's expression remained unchanged. I don't want to repeat myself. Good, very good. Elder Qing Xian nodded slightly, and a terrifying sword qi erupted from his body. I, Qing Xian, announce that from today onwards, the ninth peak will leave the sword sect. The disciples of the ninth peak will no longer be disciples of the sword sect. P.S. The 5th chapter has been updated today and will continue tomorrow. The update will be at night. Please give me monthly votes and recommendation vote. Also, Lonely Mountain has opened a personal account. I've sent some of Yi Wushuang's news. I'll also send the Patriarch of Hell's news in the future. Chapter 886. I, Qing Xian, announce that from today onwards, the ninth peak will leave the sword sect. The disciples of the ninth peak will no longer be disciples of the sword sect. As soon as Elder Qing Xian finished speaking, a terrifying sword qi erupted from his body and shot into the void. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire sword sect's first peak instantly fell silent. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as dead silence. At this moment, countless people widened their eyes as they looked at that elderly figure on the arena in disbelief. Astonishment, shock, disbelief, what did they hear? Elder Qing Xian actually wants to leave the sword sect with the ninth peak. How dare he say such treacherous words? At this moment, even the many powerhouses of the 10 high sects revealed shocked expressions. They thought they had heard wrongly. Leave the sword sect? What was the difference between this and betraying the sect? Thinking up to this point, many people subconsciously looked at the sword sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi, and the other two with ridicule in their eyes. It was as if he was saying, your subordinates are going to rebel. Let's see if you, the sect master of the sword sect, still have any face left. Let's see how a supreme sect like the sword sect can gain a foothold in the Kunlun ruins. On the arena, the pale-faced white-clothed figure who could barely stand did not say a word. He only looked at the old man who was protecting him quietly. This was the second time. The last time, he was suppressed by Su Qilin on the first peak. While countless people were laughing at him, It was this person before him who resolutely barged into the first peak and did not hesitate to fight Old Man Mysterious Sword to protect him. This time, he had killed Su Qilin in front of everyone and was doomed eternally. It was this person who stood out to protect him. For this, he did not hesitate to betray the sect. This kindness caused him, who had always been indifferent, to feel a trace of sorrow slowly flowing in his heart. Bastard! A cold shout came from Old Man Mysterious Sword and broke the dead silence. Qing Xian? What do you mean by that? Don't tell me you want to betray my sword sect? That's right. Qing Xian, you're too presumptuous. A triumphant smile flashed across Elder Heaven Sword's eyes. He said furiously, "How dare you say such disgraceful words in front of the sect master? Sect master, the 9th peak is about to rebel. I suggest that we suppress them on the spot and punish them as traitors." The 2nd peak's peak master's voice was like thunder. The 3rd peak agrees. The 4th peak agrees. The 5th peak agrees. In the blink of an eye, all the 8 peak masters of the sword sect stood up and suggested that Ling Xuanzi suppress Elder Qing Xian and the people from the 9th peak. The sword sect was said to have a total of 9 peaks, but in reality, it was divided into 2 factions. The 1st peak was stronger, so the 2nd peak to the 8th peak followed the 1st peak's lead. The 9th summit had always been a thorn in the side of the 8 summits, as well as the fact that the previous peak master of the 9th summit had offended quite a number of people due to his arrogance. As these powerhouses stood out to express their stance, the temperature of the world began to plummet at an extremely terrifying speed. In the end, countless spectators felt a bone-piercing chill seep into their bones. The sword sect was about to fall into chaos. Almost at that instant, numerous gazes simultaneously looked towards the largest lotus platform in the sky. It was because the person sitting on the lotus platform was the sword sect's sect master, Ling Xuanzi, a supreme giant who controlled a supreme sect. Under countless gazes, Ling Xuanzi's expression was terrifyingly gloomy. Reason? Sword cultivators do not bend their back. Their sword bones can drag mountains. Their heavy swords have no edges, and they're skillful. Elder Qing Xian said coldly, however, all of you are at his mercy for a reincarnator. You've already changed your minds. Ling Xuanzi's eyes shone brightly. Since Su Qilin is a disciple of the sword sect, what's wrong with us focusing on nurturing him? Focus on nurturing him? Elder Qing Xian's gaze was like a sword. Su Qilin's talent is so high that even I have to admit it. However, Yi Wushuang from the 9th peak is also extraordinary. Why are you so unfair? Who else is willing to leave the sword sect with him? Ling Xuanzi's calm gaze slowly swept across the entire 1st peak, and his gaze landed on Gu Quan and the rest. His tone seemed calm, but everyone present could feel the coldness in it. Old Man Mysterious Sword and the rest sneered in their hearts, waiting to see Qing Xian make a fool of himself. At this moment, whoever stood out would die. Only a fool would stand out. I, Gu Quan, hereby announce my withdrawal from the sword sect. Following a firm voice, Gu Quan, who was on the ground, took a deep breath in and took a step forward. Ling Xuanzi's expression remained unchanged. Anything else? Another figure took a step forward. I, Li Kong, hereby announce my withdrawal from the sword sect. I, Meng Qingshan, hereby announce my withdrawal from the sword sect. I, Su He, hereby announce my withdrawal from the sword sect. I, Yuan Tiankong, hereby announce my withdrawal from the sword sect. Even Hua Ling, who was ranked 8th among the 9 disciples of the 9th peak, bit her red lips and said resolutely, I, Hua Ling, hereby announce my withdrawal from the sword sect. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After Gu Quan, 7 figures stood out one after another. Every time one of them stood out, Old Man Mysterious Sword's expression would turn uglier. The sword sect had lost a lot of face today. At this moment, the world was incomparably silent. There were a total of 9 disciples of the 9th peak, and now all of them stood out to express their support, expressing that they wanted to leave the sword sect with Elder Qing Xian. Not a single one of them was left. Impudent! Old Man Mysterious Sword, who was in the sky, shouted angrily, and his pressure pressed down on Gu Quan and the other 7. All of you have received countless favors from the sect, yet you dare to do such a treacherous thing? Under his pressure, Gu Quan and the other 7 felt an incomparably terrifying pressure assault them, causing them to almost lose their balance. Gu Quan spat out a mouthful of blood and forcefully maintained his standing posture. He sneered, "Elder Mysterious Sword, you're wrong. Ever since we joined the sword sect, we've only learned the inheritance of the 9th peak and used the resources of the 9th peak." "That's right." Second senior brother Li Kong was drenched in blood, but he still laughed loudly. "Ever since the previous peak master of the 9th peak died, the 9th peak has never received any resources from the sect." Good, good, good. All of you are rebelling." Elder Mysterious Sword's face alternated between green and white from their words. He was unable to refute them at all. Gu Quan said, "Such a sect can be said to be heartless and unjust. What qualifications do they have to be worthy of our respect? What affection do they have for us to be reluctant to part with them?" Although the 9 brothers of the 9th peak are not biological brothers, they are better than biological brothers. Since you want to kill youngest junior brother, then step over our corpses first," Li Kong shouted. Third senior brother Meng Qingshan frowned and roared, "The 9 of us will live and die together. Whoever dares to bully any one of us will fight to the death." At that moment the 8 of them roared at the same time. Their voices shook the sky, and their expressions changed. "Live and die together. Fight to the end. Those who insult my brother will die." Chapter 887. The voices of the 8 of them shook the sky and spread out, allowing the thousands of people who had come to watch the battle to hear them clearly. Many people were moved by the aura of the 8 of them. They felt that they were truly heroic and hot-blooded. On the other hand, Yi Wushuang, who was in the arena, looked at the 8 figures quietly. His pale face gradually flushed red. Old Man Mysterious Sword snorted coldly, 8 pieces of trash. The matter of betraying the sect has become a magnificent feat in your mouth. If you dare to betray the sect today, you will be executed on the spot. Elder Heaven Sword shouted angrily, his killing intent filling the sky. Gu Quan, Ling carry your youngest junior brother and follow me. As long as there's a sword in your heart, you'll be a sword sect no matter where you go. Elder Qing Xian flung his sleeves and led the 8 people who were supporting Yi Wushuang out of the sword sect. At this moment, the sword intent on his body was shocking. Sword chi condensed into a sword pressure beside the 10 of them. His entire body seemed to have transformed into a peerless divine sword, invincible. He wanted to destroy anyone who obstructed him, and kill anyone who obstructed him. Wherever the 10 of them passed, the outsiders would make way. No one dared to stop them, but their eyes were filled with extreme shock. Obviously, they did not expect Elder Qing Xian to dare to do this. "Qing Xian, where are you going?" The 8th Peak's Peak Master shouted and took the lead to attack. A shocking sword gleam pressed down from the sky. It was as fast as lightning, and in the blink of an eye, it slashed towards Elder Qing Xian. It was like a bolt of lightning that wanted to kill him instantly. It's the 8th Peak's Peak Master, Mo Yinming. It's said that this person became a supreme giant 20 years ago and suppressed a peak. His yin-yang sword is extremely terrifying. A cry came from the crowd. "Mo Yinming, you think you're my match?" Elder Qing Xian snorted coldly. An incomparably resplendent and dazzling light bloomed from between his brows. Then, a silver-white sword actually shot towards the incoming sword gleam. Boom! With a loud bang, the incoming sword gleam immediately collapsed. The remaining silver-white sword did not slow down at all. When the 8th Peak's Peak Master was caught off guard, it forcefully severed one of his arms. Hua! Countless people were shocked at the sight of this. Clearly, they did not expect Elder Qing Xian's battle strength to reach such a level. When did you become a supreme giant? The 8th Peak Master, Mo Yinming, ignored the pain and looked at Elder Qing Xian in disbelief. I understand, so you've been hiding it all along. He was not the only one. Even the other 7 Peak Masters were shocked. The strength that Elder Qing Xian had displayed just now was much stronger than 2 months ago. So what if he's a supreme giant? You can leave today, but leave your life behind. The 7th Peak Master, Yang Si, glared angrily. Following a burst of light, a sword light cut through the heavens and the earth. He followed the sword light and slashed toward Elder Qing Xian. Seeing this scene, Gu Quan and the rest were so shocked that their hair stood on end. Especially the sword intent of the 7th Peak Master, it gave them a feeling of suffocation. Scram! Elder Qing Xian roared. His gaze was like a sword that was extremely sharp. He took a step forward and endless sword intent pressed down on the 7th Peak Master. A scream rang out, and everyone saw the 7th Peak Master fly out. Dark red blood seeped out of his eyes, ears, and nostrils. Is this a battle between sword cultivators? It's too terrifying, it's too terrifying. The 9th Peak is so desolate. Not only is there a peerless genius like Yi Wushuang, even Elder Qing Xian's battle prowess is unparalleled. Everyone present was about to go crazy. They had originally come to watch the battle between the 2 geniuses today, but they did not expect to encounter supreme giants one after another. Elder Qing Xian's expression did not change. He led Yi Wushuang and the rest out of the sword sect unhurriedly. The sword sect's 6th Peak Master has lost. The sword sect's 5th Peak Master has lost. The sword sect's 4th Peak Master has lost. The sword sect's 3rd Peak Master has lost. The sword sect's 2nd Peak Master has lost. Along the way, people attacked them one after another, but they were all defeated by the incomparably powerful Elder Qing Xian. Invincible. He's simply invincible. The crowd immediately felt suffocated. They were all shocked by Elder Qing Xian's battle prowess to the extreme. It seemed like such an existence had been hiding his strength until now. Gu Quan and the rest were already stunned. As disciples of the 9th Peak, they were the closest to Elder Qing Xian. They knew the old man in front of them very well. However, it was only at this moment that they truly realized that there were people in the 9th Peak. Qing Xian, where do you think you're going? In the end, Elder Heaven Sword of the 1st Peak made his move. Sword light shot out from the eyes of this existence, whose strength was second only to the sword sect's sect master. An incomparably terrifying storm of sword chi was born and charged straight at Elder Qing Xian. Elder Qing Xian stopped in his tracks and revealed a solemn expression. Extremely terrifying sharp swords bloomed from between his brows. Boom! A storm of sword chi suddenly erupted in the entire void, tearing the space apart in an incomparably violent manner. Blurg Elder Heaven Sword was the first to spit out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily onto the lotus platform. The long sword in his hand shattered into pieces. What? Even Elder Heaven's sword was defeated? At this moment, the entire heavens and the earth were filled with numerous cries of disbelief. They were shocked, extremely shocked. What no one noticed was that Elder Qing Xian's hand that was holding the hilt of his sword trembled. A trace of scarlet blood slowly flowed down his hand. This isn't your strength. Right at that moment, a furious roar came from Elder Heaven Sword's mouth. He stared at Elder Qing Xian. I can guarantee that this isn't your strength. At this point, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression changed. Death Sword Technique, Qing Xian, you must be cultivating the Death Sword Technique. As he said that, everyone from the sword sect was shocked. When they looked at Elder Qing Xian again, their gazes were filled with disbelief. Even Gu Quan and the rest were no exception. The so-called Death Sword Technique was the Slaughter Sword Dao created by the 5th Sect Master of the Sword Sect. This sword technique only pursued an explosive increase in strength and ignored the body's endurance. Anyone who cultivated the death sword technique could challenge opponents of a higher cultivation level. This was also the saying that the acquired stage could kill a master could kill a martial venerable could kill a pseudo-emperor, and a pseudo-emperor could kill an emperor. Let's go. Elder Qing Xian's expression was calm, as if he did not hear anything. He led Yi Wushuang and the rest towards the sword sect. Streaks of scarlet blood dripped down along his footsteps, and his hair turned white at a speed visible to the naked eye. Elder Heaven's sword roared, "Sect Master." When everyone heard that, they could not help but look at Ling Xuanzi, who was on the lotus platform. Their hearts could not help but jump. Chapter 888. From the moment Elder Qing Xian announced his departure from the sword sect until now, Ling Xuanzi had not made any obvious stand. Even though Elder Qing Xian had defeated the 8 peak masters in a row, the former had been watching from the sidelines from the beginning to the end. This caused everyone to be uncertain about his attitude. After all, this person was the sect master of the sword sect, the master of a supreme sect. His every word and action had practically determined the lives and deaths of Elder Qing Xian and the rest. A few seconds later, a faint sigh slowly came from Ling Xuanzi's mouth. "Qing Xian, you've gone too far." As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Qing Xian's expression changed drastically from 300 meters away. He suddenly waved his sleeve, and a majestic force immediately enveloped Gu Quan and the rest as they sped out of the sword sect. Elder Qing Xian, Gu Quan and the rest were so furious that they almost fainted. They had already realized something. "All of you leave." Elder Qing Xian held a sharp sword in his hand as his figure soared into the sky. Instead of retreating, he advanced and took the initiative to flash towards Ling Xuanzi, who was on the lotus platform in the sky. At the same time, the sharp sword in his hand danced rapidly in the air, causing the air around him to flow rapidly. It transformed into a monstrous sword intent that pierced straight towards Ling Xuanzi. Sword severing the ocean. As he moved forward, the endless sword intent in the surroundings moved along with him before condensing into a terrifying sword river that was over 30 meters in size. At this moment, Ling Xuanzi had yet to make a move, but everyone could already tell that Elder Qing Xian was prepared to risk his life. Facing the gigantic sword river that was charging towards him, Ling Xuanzi's expression had never changed. He merely waved his hand indifferently. The surrounding space suddenly distorted at that moment, and an irresistible force seeped out from the space. Then, it turned into a gigantic cage that charged straight at Elder Qing Xian. "Break!" The sword intent on Elder Qing Xian's body wanted to pierce through the 9 heavens, and the majestic sword intent directly slashed towards the gigantic cage. At that moment, his body suddenly froze, and then he let out a muffled groan as he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, his sword still did not stop. The sword river still covered the sky and earth as it pressed down towards Ling Xuanzi. When the sword was less than 2 inches away from Ling Xuanzi's eyes, it suddenly stopped and shattered into countless pieces. Ling Xuanzi shook his head slightly and grabbed at the sword sect's mountain gate. A resplendent mark erupted from his palm. Boom! The entire sword peak suddenly shook violently. Gu Quan and the others, who were about to rush out of the sword sect's mountain gate, discovered in despair that the formation of the mountain gate had already been activated. Bang! The group of people crashed into the barrier of the array formation. The sword intent that enveloped them suddenly collapsed, and the 9 of them fell to the ground one after another. Before they could react, they felt the space around them distort several times, and their vision blurred. When they came back to their senses, they discovered that they had appeared on the first peak out of thin air. This series of events was completed in the blink of an eye, but the situation had undergone an earth-shattering change. Dead silence. At this moment, the world was deathly silent. Everyone present looked at the figure on the lotus platform in the sky with incomparable astonishment. It was fine if the other party did not make a move, but the moment he made a move, he used a thunderous method. He first suppressed Elder Qing Xian, then used a great divine ability to forcefully bring Gu Quan and the others here. This method could be said to be despairing. At that moment, the powerhouses of the 10 high sects were all shocked. This is the aura of creation. Ling Xuanzi has actually touched the aura of creation. All the powerhouses were shocked. In the Kunlun ruins, many supreme powerhouses were at the Emperor stage, and the Emperor stage was divided into the early, intermediate, late, and even the peak stage. After the Emperor stage was the legendary creation stage. Once one stepped into the creation realm, one would be able to comprehend the mysteries of nature. The so-called comprehension of nature meant that one would be able to comprehend the mysteries of nature. Ling Xuanzi's series of thunderous methods earlier had allowed all the powerhouses present to sense the aura of creation. At that moment, the eyes of countless powerhouses present flickered, and their fear of Ling Xuanzi had reached an extreme level. Facing everyone's shock, Ling Xuanzi's expression remained the same as before as he smiled faintly. A bunch of traitors have appeared in the sect. I've made a fool of myself. Everyone fell silent, and then they looked at Elder Qing Xian, Gu Quan, and the rest who were trapped in the cage with sympathy. Under the hands of such a mighty figure, how could they leave? Elder Heaven Sword's face was filled with killing intent as he glanced at Elder Qing Xian's group. Shortly after, he coldly smiled. Qing Xian, you probably never imagined that you would end up like this, right? Unexpectedly, Elder Qing Xian laughed out loud and looked at Ling Xuanzi with a mocking expression. I understand now. I finally understand why all of you value Su Qilin so much. So, before he could finish his sentence, all his teeth fell out. Ling Xuanzi tapped Yi Wushuang, who was on the ground, lightly from afar. The purple pearl in Yi Wushuang's hand shot into his hand. Ling Xuanzi, why did you have to wait until now to attack? A divine thought came from the purple pearl, and it was filled with hatred. Don't forget, if it wasn't for me, how could you have comprehended the creation intent? I don't need you to tell me what to do. Ling Xuanzi smiled faintly, and then his expression darkened. Don't worry, I'll help you recover your physical body, but don't forget your promise to me. Of course. The voice from the purple pearl smirked coldly, however, you can't kill Yi Wushuang. You have to keep him for me. When I've fused with the degeneration of my previous life, I'll kill him myself to fulfill my Tao heart. All right. Ling Xuanzi nodded slightly. Old Man Mysterious Sword waved his sleeve. Men, take them down. Following his words, powerhouses from the Sword sect immediately landed on the ground and took down Elder Qing Xian and the rest. Everyone, this matter has come to an end. Ling Xuanzi raised his eyes slightly and sized up everyone. He said calmly, the joke made my Sword sect feel ashamed. For this, my Sword sect is willing to give everyone a Sword Soul Pill to express our apology. What? Sword Soul Pill? Could it be the Sword Soul Pill that can increase one's comprehension of the Sword Tao? Not bad, what a generous offer. Hearing that, the originally uneasy crowd cried out in surprise, and their brows were filled with excitement. Right at this moment, a cold voice suddenly came from the seats of the 10 high sects. Wait! Everyone immediately stopped talking and subconsciously looked in the direction of the voice. A Taoist in green clothes with a horsetail whisk in his hand suddenly stood up slowly from the Tao sect's seat. It's the Tao sect's Tao Hall Master, Chun Junzi. Someone recognized him at a glance. Under everyone's gazes, the other party first bowed to Ling Xuanzi before saying, Sect Master Ling, before I leave, there's something I must clarify in front of everyone. Hearing that, Elder Qing Xian, who was suppressed in the distance, could not help but smile bitterly. Chapter 889. Sensing the abnormality in his tone, Ling Xuanzi, who was on the lotus platform, frowned. Brother Chun Jun, feel free to speak your mind. Chun Junzi smiled faintly and went straight to the point. I want to ask Sect Master Ling for a person. May I know who you want? Ling Xuanzi replied. For a moment, countless people looked at Chun Junzi. Obviously, they did not know what he was up to. Chun Junzi took a deep breath in and raised his head to look at Yi Wushuang, who was on the ground. He swept his horsetail whisk. I want to ask Sect Master Ling for this brat. Boom! The moment these words were spoken, it was like a heavy bomb that fell into the crowd, causing a terrifying uproar. What does Chun Junzi mean by this? Could it be that he's taken a fancy to Yi Wushuang's talent, so he wants to protect him? That's possible. However, Yi Wushuang is now viewed as a traitor by the people of the Ninth Peak. I'm afraid it's inappropriate for Chun Junzi to do this, right? In an instant, a wave of discussion erupted in the crowd, and all the whispers entered the ears of Ling Xuanzi and the rest. At that moment, the expressions of Old Man Mysterious Sword, Elder Heaven Sword, and the rest changed. If the Dao sect really wanted to protect Yi Wushuang, things would be troublesome. Ling Xuanzi's gaze darkened, and he seemed to be displeased. Are you planning to interfere in the internal affairs of my sword sect? No, no. Meeting his intimidating gaze, Chun Junzi shook his head slightly and said, Before that, I have to ask everyone a question. His gaze swept across the crowd and paused for a few seconds on the 10 high sects. Everyone, do you still remember that a person wearing a conical hat killed many supreme paragons of the Kunlun ruins 5 days ago? Following his words, Gu Quan, Hua Ling, and the rest reacted at that moment. Gu Quan, Hua Ling, and the rest also reacted at that moment. Their faces were pale, and their eyes were filled with guilt as they looked at Yi Wushuang. Brother Chun Junzi, how could we not know about this? A powerhouse of the Spirit Talisman sect stood up and sneered. This matter shook the entire Kunlun void. Even the #1 true disciple of our Spirit Talisman sect, Tuo Belong, was killed by this bastard. That's right. The son of Sect Master Ing of the Demon Clan, Pink Prince, also died in his hands. One of the leaders of the Demon Clan smiled coldly. In an instant, the people from the various forces present all responded. When this matter was brought up, their faces were filled with killing intent. Fellow Taoist Chun Jun, what you said has nothing to do with my sword sect, right? Ling Xuanzi spoke non-committally. Among the 10 high sects of the Kunlun ruins, only the people from Purple Cap Mountain and the sword sect did not die in Yi Chen's hands. Therefore, the sword sect did not pay much attention to this matter. It's naturally related to your sword sect. Chun Junzi smirked coldly. The reason why our sect's supreme paragons died that day was because of a sword, and this sword belonged to your sword sect's 9th peak, Yi Wushuang. A gloomy look flashed through his eyes. The person in the bamboo hat won this sword that day, and he even used this sword to kill Tuo Belong of my Spirit Talisman sect before vanishing without a trace. At this point, he suddenly raised his head to look at Yi Wushuang. His gaze focused on the sword in Yi Wushuang's hand. Everyone, take a look at this sword. Do you think it looks familiar? Everyone followed his gaze. The expressions of countless people, including the leaders of the 10 high sects, changed at the same time. Wasn't this sword bought by the person in the bamboo hat? How did it appear in this brat's hands? Could it be that the thief in the bamboo hat that day was Yi Wushuang in disguise? That's possible. What a double-edged sword. This brat is truly cunning. At that moment the entire world was filled with furious voices, and the temperature of the entire first peak suddenly dropped, as if it had cooled by dozens of degrees. Hearing this voice, even the expressions of Ling Xuanzi and the others could not help but change. They had never noticed this detail. On the other hand, Chun Junzi from the Dao sect slowly looked at Ling Xuanzi with an unconvinced expression. Sect Master Ling, do you think this has something to do with your sword sect? Ling Xuanzi was silent. On the other hand, Old Man Mysterious Sword explained, Everyone, we don't know about this. Moreover, Yi Wushuang is now a traitor, so there's no need to talk about protecting him. Yi Wushuang, let me ask you, why is this sword in your hands? The devil sex powerhouse looked straight at Yi Wuxuang. His cold gaze was like that of a ferocious beast that was about to devour someone. Is there a need to ask? The powerhouse on the ghoul sex seat smirked coldly, and an extremely bloodthirsty arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. This brat must have disguised himself and killed the supreme paragons of our supreme sex. Yi Wuxuang did not say a word in the face of everyone's interrogation. He lowered his head to look at his sword, his eyes filled with confusion. His silence seemed to everyone to be tacit agreement. A debt must be repaid and a life must be paid. This is a matter of course. The powerhouse of the witchcraft sect suddenly looked at Ling Xuanzi and shouted like thunder, "Sect Master Ling, you must hand this brat over to us today. Otherwise, your sword sect alone won't be able to withstand our wrath." Ling Xuanzi was about to speak when he was interrupted by a sudden voice. "This has nothing to do with youngest junior brother. Don't wrongly accuse him." Everyone looked over and saw Hua Ling struggling. Youngest junior brother didn't kill those people. Please don't wrongly accuse him. Then who did you say killed them? Chun Junzi shouted. Hua Ling hesitated for a moment before biting her lip and saying, "After youngest junior brother's sword was auctioned off in Border Dragon City by the people from the first peak, eldest senior brother, second senior brother, and I rushed over," she slowly told them everything that happened, including how they followed Yi Chen. However, she hid the relationship between Yi Chen and Yi Wuxuang. The powerhouse of the devil sex smirked coldly. "According to what you said, that person can kill supreme paragons. How could he not notice that you guys were following him? If you don't tell the truth, not only will Yi Wuxuang die, even you guys will be no exception." Chun Junzi's might was shocking. "Actually, we were discovered, but he didn't kill us. He even told us." At this point, Hua Ling could no longer hide it, so she could only say it in one breath. "He also told us that he's youngest junior brother's brother, and then he handed youngest junior brother's sword to us." Yi Wuxuang's eyes that had never changed for 1,000 years finally changed slightly. He suddenly raised his head to look at Hua Ling. "See, could it be?" The powerhouse of the Star Sect immediately shouted, "What's this person's name? Where is he now?" "He's Yi. Mad Southern Yi," Hua Ling stammered. Boom! Yi Wuxuang's body trembled violently, and he felt a wave of sourness wash over him like a flood. "It's Big Brother! It's really Big Brother!" Following Hua Ling's words, it was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, and the crowd was in an uproar. "What? Mad Southern Yi is Yi Wuxuang's brother? How is this possible?" Numerous ear-piercing cries reverberated through the heavens and the earth like muffled claps of thunder. "Nonsense!" The powerhouse of the ghoul sex smirked coldly, and then he said coldly, "This woman is telling the truth. I think I'll use the soul-searching method on her and Yi Wuxuang." As soon as he finished speaking, he grabbed at Yi Wuxuang and the rest. A surging vile energy immediately erupted from his palm and flashed towards Yi Wuxuang and the rest. Just as the vile energy was about to approach Yi Wuxuang and the rest, a spiritual energy vortex suddenly appeared between heaven and earth. Along with the appearance of the spiritual energy vortex, the vile energy that was charging at Yi Wuxuang and the rest was instantly devoured by the spiritual energy vortex. The spiritual energy vortex suddenly went crazy. It was as if a strange energy of heaven and earth had descended from the sky and walked out of the void. It surged into the vortex and stirred up the wind and clouds. At this moment, the weather changed and the sky changed color. The sword sect master, Ling Xuanzi's expression changed. He suddenly stood up and shot his gaze into the sky. In that direction, there was a monstrous murderous aura, accompanied by terrifying lightning rolling over. He was not the only one. Even the leaders of the 10 high sects raised their eyes and looked into the sky. The origin energy in their bodies started to tremble, and it was as if an indescribable pressure was descending from the starry sky. The tens of thousands of people present immediately felt the pressure. Those with weaker cultivations vomited blood on the spot and fell to the ground, their faces filled with shock. Rumble, boundless thunderclouds swept over from the sky like a surging ocean, followed by the roars of thunder. A thin figure bathed in the thunderclouds slowly appeared. He seemed to be carrying a baby in his arms, and his long hair fluttered in the wind and clouds. While the tens of thousands of people were shocked, Yi Wuxiang's body could not help but tremble slightly at that moment. His eyes that were as calm as the surface of a lake rippled at this moment. It's Big Brother. It's really Big Brother. P.S. Chapter 4 has been updated today. Tomorrow will be the climax. 5 chapters will be the base. Chapter 890. Sword Sect First Peak. At this moment, the world was deathly silent. The tens of thousands of people present all stared in shock at the skinny figure in the sky who was stepping on the thunderclouds. However, the thunderclouds were too dense, and they could not see clearly. This person was like an emperor descending. Heavenly lightning surged, blotting out the sky and covering the sun. It was extremely terrifying, as if it was his arrival. At this moment Yi Wuxiang's cold eyes actually became moist. It's Big Brother. It's really Big Brother. He's here. His big brother is covered in lightning, stepping on heaven and earth, stepping through the sea of clouds. He's here. He and his big brother had known each other for thousands of years, so they were already extremely familiar with each other's aura. As for Gu Quan, Hua Ling, and the rest beside him, they were already speechless from shock. However, their gazes were fixed on the approaching figure. Not only did youngest junior brother's big brother survive the combined attacks of 2 supreme giants, now he even came to the sword sect? This person is actually so terrifying? Elder Qin Xian, who had already lost all hope, stared blankly at the sky. He was extremely shocked as he looked at the monstrous murderous aura that erupted from the thin figure. At this moment, not only Yi Wuxiang and the rest, the tens of thousands of people present, even the people from the sword sect, were shocked. Who exactly is this person? Chun Junzi from the Dao sect stared at the sky, and his pupils constricted. He can actually control thunderclouds and possess such great divine might? Even in his Dao sect, other than his senior brother, Sect Master Lei Xing, no one had ever been able to control divine lightning. The person who came is definitely a supreme giant. Could it be the master of Purple Cap Mountain? The Ghoul sect leader sucked in a breath of cold air, feeling horrified. His Ghoul sect walked the path of evil. Under the thunderclouds that filled the sky, he felt his vile energy tremble endlessly, and he had the urge to kneel on the ground and worship. Even they were like this, let alone Old Man Mysterious Sword and the rest. Old Man Heaven Sword suppressed the shock in his heart and muttered, "Why is this person heading straight for my sword sect? Could it be that he has ill intentions?" Thinking to this point, he could not help but look at Ling Xuanzi. How could Ling Xuanzi not understand what he meant? After taking a deep breath in, he cupped his fists at the figure in the air and said, "Who are you? Why did you suddenly come to my sword sect?" With that, his eyes flickered incessantly. He was the one with the highest cultivation among everyone present. Precisely because of that, he saw something that no one else saw. His eyes were fixed on the thunderclouds beneath Yi Chen's feet. There was a trace of the power of the laws there. It was the power of the laws that controlled the power of lightning. This made him extremely fearful because he had to step into the creation realm in order to control the rules. The next moment, the figure had already reached the point where everyone could see it clearly. What came into view was an ordinary-looking young man. The young man's long hair fluttered in the wind. His expression was cold, and his eyes were cold. In his arms was a little girl around 5 or 6 years old. The little girl's features were exquisite, like a porcelain doll's. When she grew up, she would definitely be a beauty. However, the little girl was looking at them with her big black eyes, and her eyes were full of curiosity. "It's him!" After seeing the young man's face, the countless powerhouse's eyes were filled with shock. Mad Southern Yi, he's Mad Southern Yi. Didn't two supreme giants leave the mountain to look for him before this? How is he still alive? In an instant, an uproar broke out everywhere like muffled thunder. Countless gazes trembled. The thunderclouds in the sky gradually dispersed. The thin figure carried the child in his arms and descended from the sky step by step, landing beside Yi Wuxuang. Plop! Under countless gazes, the white-clothed figure suddenly knelt heavily in front of the young man. An unusually hoarse and excited voice came from the former's mouth at this moment. "Be big brother." Yi Chen looked at the young man kneeling before him quietly. After not seeing him for half a year, the latter had changed a lot. However, he could still see the innocent child from the latter's teary eyes. Under the dead silence and the stunned gazes, Yi Chen smiled and put his hand on the latter's shoulder. "You silly brat." His deep eyes were slightly moved, and he took a deep breath in. "I've finally found you." At this moment, the atmosphere between heaven and earth seemed to have frozen. Everyone stared blankly at this scene. One was a peerless god of death from the secular world who had single-handedly destroyed the 5 ancient clans and killed 2 emperor-stage powerhouses. The other was the sword sect's 9th peak's sword son, the genius of the Kunlun ruins who possessed the indestructible sword body and had just defeated Su Qilin. And these two were brothers. Thinking up to this point, countless gazes turned to look at Hua Ling in unison. Only at this moment did they realize that what she said was true. Yi Wuxuang and Mad Southern Yi are actually brothers. Unbelievable, truly unbelievable. Isn't that so? Yi Wuxuang is already so monstrous. I didn't expect his brother to be even more monstrous. Faced with the shocking discussions, Yi Chen was stunned. "Get up." Yi Chen was unmoved. He extended his hand and helped the young man kneeling before him up gently. He reached out and touched the latter's head. When he saw that the latter was already as tall as him, his emotions surged. "Not bad, you've grown taller and more handsome." Yi Wuxuang could not help but reveal a shy smile. It seemed like he would only show such an expression in front of Yi Chen. If it were anyone else, he would look cold, and no one would dare to touch him. Yi Chen lowered his head and looked at Meng Meng, who was in his embrace. "My strange daughter, didn't you say that you wanted to see Uncle Wuxuang? Why aren't you talking now?" The little girl struggled out of Yi Chen's embrace and hugged Yi Wuxuang's thigh. "Uncle Wuxuang, I miss you so much." Yi Wuxuang smiled brightly. He wanted to pick her up, but he realized that he did not have the strength to do so. "Take the pill." Yi Chen flicked his finger and many medicinal pills shot out immediately. They landed in Yi Wuxuang and the rest's hands one after another. "We'll catch up after I'm done with this." "Big brother." Yi Wuxuang was touched, but he still said, "Thank you, you silly boy. You're thanking your big brother." Yi Chen scolded while laughing. He then said in all seriousness, "Just watch from the side. Today I'll be your sky." When he finished speaking, he slowly turned around. In that instant, everyone could sense that the temperature in the surroundings had abruptly dropped. The gentleness on the former's body instantly disappeared, replaced by a monstrous ferocity that surged out like a tide. Chapter 891. Yi Chen scanned the entire place coldly. Countless people lowered their heads, not daring to look him in the eye. Su Yuwei, who was in the crowd, was trembling in fear. She did not dare to lift her head to look at Yi Chen. The commotion that Yi Chen caused when he arrived was too shocking. Su Yuwei came to the Kunlun ruins earlier than Yi Chen. Because she was Su Qilin's sister, she obtained many resources in the sword sect. Coupled with the fact that Z was not bad, she had many suitors, and no one dared to bully her. This gradually made her feel superior. Especially after stepping into the master stage from a mortal in less than a month, she felt that she was quite talented. Even though Yi Chen was very powerful in the secular world, she was no longer in the same world as him ever since she entered the Kunlun ruins and joined the sword sect. To her, it might not take long for her to catch up to Yi Chen's cultivation base. She might even leave him behind. She had fantasized more than once that she would return to the secular world and show off to Yi Chen when her cultivation base reached a certain level one day. However, with Yi Chen's appearance, all her confidence and sense of superiority were instantly crushed. It was as if Yi Chen had stepped on her to the ground and stomped her into the mortal world. Therefore, she did not dare to look at Yi Chen. She did not dare to let Yi Chen recognize her. At that moment, someone stepped out from the quiet scene. "Mad Southern Yi, did you kill the saintess of the witchcraft sect?" Everyone immediately looked in the direction of the voice, and could not help but be shocked. It was an old man dressed in a green robe. His green robe was densely covered with goo insects. Elder Gu of the witchcraft sect was a supreme giant. His status was second only to the sect master. As soon as he said that, everyone looked at Yi Chen. If what Hua Ling said was true and Yi Chen was the man in the bamboo hat outside Border Dragon City that day, it meant that Yi Chen was truly standing against the Kunlun ruins. After all, he had killed too many supreme paragons. 8 of the 10 high sects had died in his hands, and that did not include the other small sections. "That's right, it's me." Yi Chen looked into his eyes coldly. "Not only that, even Elder Zhu and Granny Snake from your witchcraft sect died in my hands." Hua, as soon as these words were spoken, the entire place fell silent. "Good, very good." Elder Gu of the witchcraft sect was stunned at first. Then, he sneered. His eyes filled with a sinister glint. "Mad Southern Yi, does that mean that you killed my Dao sect's young master Zhong Rui?" Dao sect's Chun Junzi shouted like thunder. The powerhouse of the demon sect roared, and the pink prince of the demon sect, and the young master of the ghoul sect Jiao Ying. There's also our spirit talisman sects to Oba Long, and my star sects Shang Xingchen. At that moment, 9 of the 10 high sects stood out and looked at Yi Chen with killing intent. At this moment, the temperature between heaven and earth suddenly dropped. "This is bad, this is bad." The expressions of the people from the 9th peak changed drastically when they saw that. They did not expect Yi Chen to admit it in public. The 10 high sects all had supreme giants present. No matter how powerful he was, he would not be able to withstand the anger of these people, right? Only Yi Wushuang's expression remained the same. His eyes were filled with determination. Even if the entire world was his enemy, he would advance and retreat with Yi Chen. This brat is really walking into a trap. The Sword Sect's first peak's peak master, Old Man Mysterious Sword, sneered. He can forget about leaving alive after killing so many people. Not only him, even Yi Wushuang and the rest behind him will die. Elder Heaven Sword, who was next to him, had a playful expression. When Yi Chen arrived, the two of them were worried that the situation would turn around. However, now that Yi Chen had become the target of everyone, they felt much more at ease. In an instant, the world was filled with an incomparably murderous aura. The killing intent that was about to materialize caused many people's expressions to change. Chun Junzi flung his horsetail whisk and said coldly, "Mad Southern Yi, you killed my Dao sect's Taoist disciple, Zhong Rui. Don't you have to give my Dao sect an explanation?" "What explanation do you want?" Yi Chen was fearless as he stood proudly. "If those so-called supreme paragons of your sects didn't covet the things in my hands and attacked me, how could they have died?" At this point, he looked at the powerhouses and shouted like thunder, "They can kill me, but I can't kill them?" At the end of the day, it still comes down to who has the biggest fist. Impudent! The Taoist priest from Spirit Talisman sect was so angry that his beard trembled. "Do you know that your actions are equivalent to becoming enemies with the 10 high sects and the Kunlun ruins?" That's right. The supreme powerhouse of Star Sect took a step forward, his killing intent filling the sky. "Mad Southern Yi, even if you possess the battle prowess of a supreme powerhouse, are you really that naive? Do you think you can suppress the Kunlun ruins by yourself?" Countless people's expressions changed when they heard that. The supreme powerhouse of star sex words were equivalent to putting Yi Chen on the opposite side of the entire Kunlun ruins. It could be said to be harsh words. Ah! However, Yi Chen suddenly laughed out loud. What are you laughing at? Chun Junzi frowned. A hint of disdain appeared in Yi Che's eyes. You're right. My purpose of coming here this time is to make the Kunlun ruins submit to me. Otherwise, I'll slaughter the entire Kunlun ruins. As soon as he said that, the entire place fell into dead silence. Everyone looked at Yi Chen in disbelief. They looked at him as if they were looking at a lunatic. Shameless boasting. A supreme powerhouse on the ghoul sex seat scoffed coldly. He turned into a phantom and charged at Yi Chen. I'll kill you here today as an offering to the spirit of our ghoul sex young master, Jiao. It's Venerable Master Ghoul. Rumor has it that when Venerable Master Ghoul's mother was pregnant with him, she passed by the mass grave at night and was surrounded by hundreds of ghosts. After Venerable Master Ghoul was born, he was tested to have an extremely powerful ghost body. The battle between the supreme powerhouses is about to begin. When they saw Venerable Master Ghoul being the first to lose his cool and attack, everyone's hearts could not help but tremble. This was a battle between supreme powerhouses. Go to hell, brat! Venerable Master Ghoul stepped through the air as vile energy shot out from his palm. In the end, it turned into a black spear that was filled with monstrous vile energy. At the next moment, he threw the black spear in his hand at Yi Chen in the air. In the blink of an eye, the black spear appeared before Yi Chen. Mad Southern Yi, this is the vile bone spear. I've nurtured it with the resentment of 49 children. It can kill supreme powerhouses. Venerable Master Ghoul sneered as if he could see Yi Chen being pierced by the black spear and his body being corroded. However, the smile on his face froze in the next moment. A bolt of lightning suddenly exploded in Yi Chen's hand. There was a purple sword gleam in the lightning. As everyone's pupils constricted, the sword gleam turned into a bolt of purple lightning that slashed at the vile bone spear. Chapter 892. As the purple lightning pierced through the sky, the vile bone spear shattered. The baleful bone spear was the first to shatter from the tip of the spear. A trace of purple lightning wrapped around it, and in an instant it collapsed into black fragments. Blech! Venerable Master Ghoul immediately spat a mouthful of blood and retreated. He could not help but exclaim in shock, "Purple Heaven Divine Lightning, this is Purple Heaven Divine Lightning!" Slash! Yi Chen shouted softly and swung his sword. Lightning flashed on the true martial thousand lightning sword. It slashed at Venerable Master Ghoul like a thunderclap. Rumble! The lightning tore through the sky and landed on Venerable Master Ghoul with an unstoppable force. Then, it turned into lightning that coiled around his body. Ah! Venerable Master Ghoul screamed repeatedly. Soon after, he was sliced into two by the sword gleam. Even his soul was quickly shattered by the sword. The supreme giant, Venerable Master Ghoul, was dead. At that moment, the world fell into dead silence. Countless people looked at Yi Chen in disbelief with their eyes wide open. The two of them had only fought for a short while, but a supreme giant had already died. Moreover, it was Venerable Master Ghoul from the Ghoul sect. Hua Ling from the 9th peak was already dumbfounded. In their eyes, the supreme giants were no different from gods. However, they were still killed by Yi Chen with a single strike. The most shocked ones were none other than Old Man Mysterious Sword and Elder Heaven Sword from the Sword sect. They looked at each other and saw a trace of uneasiness in each other's eyes. I have to believe it even if I don't want to now. One of the giants' faces was extremely pale. This person really has the combat power to kill supreme giants. Elder Earth Sword from the Sword sect and Granny Snake from the Witchcraft sect have probably been beheaded long ago. The rest of the giants said nothing, but the shock in their eyes could not be erased. Initially, they wanted to settle the matter of the Supreme Paragon being killed by Yi Chen. However, Venerable Master Ghoul's death had completely woken them up. Who else wants an explanation from me? Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen stood with his sword in hand like a god of death. He glanced at everyone coldly. "Why don't you stand out and let me have a look?" As soon as he said that, the entire place fell silent. No one spoke. With Venerable Master Ghoul as an example, no one dared to stand out. Even Chun Junzi and the other supreme giants of the Tao sect were no exception. Their eyes flickered, and they all chose to remain silent. This time, the Ghoul sect had suffered a double loss. Not only did they lose a supreme paragon, they even lost a supreme giant. One person intimidated so many supreme giants. This person is truly domineering. As expected of Yi Wushuang's brother. That's right. With such an elder brother, who can touch Yi Wushuang today? Countless thoughts flashed through the minds of countless people, and the world became strangely silent. When Yi Chen's gaze landed on Elder Qing Xian, he relaxed a little. "You're Elder Qing Xian from the 9th peak?" "That's right." The man nodded weakly. Yi Chen smiled lightly. There was an endless chill in his smile. "Who are the people from the Sword sect? Please point them out to me one by one." "All right." Elder Qing Xian gave him a deep look. Without hesitation, he pointed at the 8th peak's peak master, Mo Yinming, and the others. "This person is called Mo Yinming, the peak master of the 8th peak. His name is Yang Si, the 7th peak master. This person is called Han Yi, the 6th peak master." In just a few breaths of time, Elder Qing Xian had pointed out all the peak masters of the Sword sect, including Old Man Mysterious Sword, Elder Heaven Sword, and the rest. Yi Chen nodded lightly. He then turned around to look at the 8th peak's peak master, Mo Yinming. A cold gleam flashed through his eyes. He took a step forward, and in the blink of an eye, he tore through the void and flew towards him. Mo Yinming could not help but fly into a rage when he saw Yi Chen charging at him with killing intent. "How dare you!" As soon as he finished speaking, a shocking sword gleam erupted from his body. It set off a monstrous wave that slashed at Yi Chen's head. He was the peak master of the Sword sect's 8th peak. He suppressed a peak and was a supreme giant. Although he had lost to Elder Qing Xian previously, it was only because Elder Qing Xian had cultivated the death sword tactic. Even though Yi Chen had descended with an extremely powerful aura and killed Venerable Master Ghoul. However, if he were to show cowardice in front of countless outsiders in his own territory, he would probably become a laughing stock. At the same time, everyone stared at the two of them, afraid that they would miss any details. Boom! As Mo Yinming's shocking sword gleam slashed out, it instantly turned into a gigantic sword shadow in the air. The sword chi whistled like a giant beast's roar. What a powerful sword strike! One of the powerhouses present could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Even I wouldn't dare to take this strike head-on. Almost at that moment, Yi Wushuang and the rest fixed their gazes on Yi Chen, especially Elder Qing Xian. However, Yi Chen did not dodge the shocking sword strike. He extended his hand and grabbed the sword shadow in an overbearing manner. He exerted strength in his arm and crushed it. What? Mo Yinming's eyelids twitched. Before he could react, he saw a bolt of lightning flash in Yi Chen's hand all of a sudden. The bolt of lightning struck him. Rumble! With an earth-shattering explosion, Mo Yinming screamed. His body collapsed, and his soul collapsed on the spot. The Sword sect's 8th peak's peak master, Mo Yinming, was dead. The entire world fell into dead silence at this moment. One strike. With just a single strike, he had killed a supreme powerhouse. At that moment, everyone stared blankly at the long sword in Yi Chen's hand that was glowing with lightning. Their eyes were filled with shock. Everyone from the 9th peak, including Hua Ling, was dumbfounded. T2 powerful, looks like I was wrong. Elder Qing Xian's eyes twitched. Before this, he knew that Yi Chen's combat ability was probably not inferior to Yi Wushuang's. However, he did not expect Yi Chen to be so terrifying that he could kill a supreme giant instantly. A few seconds later, a powerhouse cried out in shock. There's something wrong with that sword. What's that sword? Dao Sex Chun Junzi's pupils constricted. It actually carries the power of lightning? From the looks of it, it's the purple cloud divine lightning. Those who insult my brother will die. Yi Chen scoffed coldly. As he spoke, he flashed and charged toward the Seventh Peak's Peak Master, Yang Si. The reason why he came so late was because he had recovered his exhausted true origin energy on the way here. At the same time, he had refined the true martial thousand lightning sword. Yang Si's ability was much more powerful than Mo Yinming. However, after witnessing Mo Yinming's death, the fear he had for Yi Chen was at its peak. Therefore, his expression changed drastically when he saw Yi Chen charging at him. He ran and tried to escape. Die. However, Yi Chen did not give him the chance at all. After he got close, he swung the true martial thousand lightning sword in his hand and slashed. Thunder rumbled. Boom! Yang Si's body exploded, and his soul was shattered by the purple cloud divine lightning that erupted from the true martial thousand lightning sword. The sword sect's Seventh Peak's Peak Master, Yang Si, was dead. Chapter 893. At this moment, the entire First Peak was dead silent. Someone trembled and said in shock, "This person is killing supreme giants like dogs." Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen did not stop at all. Instead, he charged straight at the Ninth Peak's Peak Master, Han Yi. He did not walk fast, but every step he took seemed to step on the hearts of the onlookers. Their minds rumbled and trembled. The Sixth Peak's Peak Master, Han Yi, was completely scared out of his wits. He immediately roared, "Sect Master, save me!" Almost at that instant, Ling Xuanzi, who was on the lotus platform, shouted, "Stop!" As soon as he finished speaking. With a wave of his sleeve, the space next to Yi Chen suddenly distorted. An irresistible force spread out from within. "Get lost!" Yi Chen waved the true martial thousand lightning sword and swept it with a simple slash. It contained boundless power and directly dispersed the force. At the next moment, the true martial thousand lightning sword slashed out. As the sword gleam swept past, Han Ye's entire body and soul were destroyed. He did not even have the time to scream. The sword sect's Sixth Peak's Peak Master was dead. Oh my God, how long has it been since this person appeared? 4 supreme giants have died in his hands. Everyone says that this person came from the secular world. I won't believe it even if you beat me to death. How could the secular world nurture such a peerless god of death? Could it be that the calamity of the Kunlun ruins has arrived? Countless people's eyes trembled in disbelief. Any supreme giant was a powerhouse who ruled over a region. However, they were being killed by Yi Chen like pigs and dogs at that moment. If news of this got out, it would definitely shake the entire Kunlun ruins. Countless supreme giants would definitely not be able to sit still. Mad Southern Yi, aren't you being too presumptuous? At that moment, even the sword sect master, Ling Xuanzi's face turned ugly. It had only been a short while, but 3 peak masters from his sword sect had died in Yi Chen's hands. Even he could not save the 6th Peak's Peak Master, Han Yi. At the same time, the fear he had for Yi Chen was at its peak. To him, Yi Chen must have come into contact with the blessed stage. I'm being presumptuous? Yi Chen, who had killed 4 people consecutively, was extremely calm. His cold gaze landed on Ling Xuanzi. When your sword sect bullied my brother, did you ever think about whether you were being presumptuous? I've only killed 3 pieces of trash now, and you're already distressed? The killing intent in his eyes did not diminish. His gaze lingered on Old Man Mysterious Sword. Compared to a strand of my brother's hair, what are you lot? Ling Xuanzi's eyes were grim as he stared at Yi Chen. His eyes were as cold as a knife, but he did not attack in the end. Yes, he didn't dare. The reason being, Yi Chen gave him a dangerous feeling since the beginning. He was not confident that he could see through Yi Chen completely. All of you will die too. Yi Chen stretched his arm and pointed at Old Man Mysterious Sword and the rest. He grinned sinisterly. Like I said, even Jesus can't save you guys. Meeting his gaze, Old Man Mysterious Sword subconsciously shivered. He felt a bone-piercing chill in his heart. Mad Southern Yi, don't be so arrogant. Elder Heaven's Sword snorted coldly, his eyes filled with resentment. This is my sword sect, not a place where you can behave atrociously. From the first peak to the fifth peak, listen to my command. Set up the 5 Chi origin sword formation. We must kill this brat. As soon as he finished speaking, 5 figures rode on sword gleams and landed on the 5-sword peak. The leader was the peak master of the sword sect's first peak, Old Man Mysterious Sword. Formation, rise. Under everyone's gaze, Old Man Mysterious Sword's eyes were bloodshot. Sword intent erupted from his body and enveloped the entire first peak. At the next moment, the entire first peak suddenly trembled violently, and then streams of earthen yellow aura shot out from the ground. Rumble. The earthen yellow aura finally gathered in front of him and quickly condensed into a huge earthen yellow sword that was about 60 meters long. The people on the other 4 sword peaks followed suit. In an instant, 4 earthen yellow swords rose into the sky. Is this the sword sect's 5 Chi origin formation? Rumor has it that this formation is related to the sword sect's 5 great sword peaks. It requires 5 supreme giants to use it together and extract the earth energy of the 5 peaks to form 5 life destruction swords. Tisk, 5 supreme giants casting a formation together? That's enough to kill any supreme giant, right? Mad Southern Yi is doomed. The entire world was in an uproar. They were all shocked by this huge technique. Many people shook their heads. Clearly, they did not think highly of Yi Chen. This formation is similar to our Star Sect's Big Dipper formation. The Star Sect's supreme giant sucked in a breath of cold air. The moment the 5 earthen yellow swords appeared, the origin energy between heaven and earth started to go berserk. Elder Qing Xian's expression changed drastically. Fellow Yi, this is the sword sect's peerless killing formation. You can't use force. Quickly leave with your people. Ah. Old Man Mysterious Sword laughed maniacally. Where do you think you're going? Once the formation is formed, you'll definitely die. Mad Southern Yi, die. With that, he waved the sword in his hand and stirred the wind and clouds like a peerless beast had awakened. Boom! The gigantic sword pierced through the sky and slashed at Yi Chen. There was a sword chi that was 100 feet long in the air. It was enough to split a mountain in half. Even the air trembled in front of it. Kill. Yi Chen's expression did not change. He waved the true martial thousand lightning sword and slashed through the air. A shocking sword gleam wrapped in lightning slashed. However, such a strike collapsed instantly under the gigantic sword. Then, it slashed Yi Chen hard. Bang! Dazzling sparks surged on Yi Chen's body under the strike. Although he was not injured because of his physical strength. However, under that incomparably majestic force, he was slashed to the ground, immediately stirring up smoke and dust into the air. Mad Southern Yi is dead? Countless people focused their eyes as they tried to look for Yi Chen. Ah! Old Man Mysterious Sword's maniacal laughter was heard. Mad Southern Yi, oh Mad Southern Yi, you can't even withstand a single strike from me. You're really too weak. Youngest junior brother's elder brother died just like that? Hua Ling and the rest from the 9th peak immediately felt despair. My daddy won't die. At that moment a crisp voice was heard. Meng Meng was pouting. She shared the same bloodline as Yi Chen. She could sense if Yi Chen was fine or not. A supreme giant shook his head and sneered. If your sword sect had used this formation earlier, why would the 3 peak masters have died? Before he could finish, the smile on his face suddenly froze. His eyes that were looking at the ground constricted, as if he had seen a ghost. Amidst the dust that filled the sky, a figure rose into the sky and shot into the sky. Chapter 894. He wore a purple gold crown embedded with treasures on his head, a golden beast mask belt around his waist, 2 bronze breastplates on his front and back, and purple cloud kicking boots on his feet. His long hair that reached his shoulders fluttered in the wind, complementing his figure that was hovering in midair. He was like a god that had descended into the world. His skin was faintly glowing, and the depths of his deep eyes shone with a divine light that looked down on all living things. When they saw that person's face clearly, the entire world fell silent. Everyone was stunned. "He's fine." It was Unknown who cried out involuntarily in shock, but it roused everyone from their daze, and their faces were filled with shock. Even Meng Meng was stunned. She rubbed her eyes and said happily, "Daddy, Daddy, you're so handsome." It was the little girl's first time seeing Yi Chen's form after activating the night demon armor. Especially his long hair that was fluttering in the wind, he looked like a mad demon. How is this possible?" Old Man Mysterious Sword's face turned pale in disbelief. In the air, Yi Chen revealed the true form of the night demon armor. He stood in the air like an emperor looking down on the world. The breastplate on his chest revealed Night Demon's face. "Master, this bird sword sex 5 chi origin formation isn't much. It's not even enough to tickle me." The old man spat. "Master, break this F*** formation and let them know what brutality is." "As you wish," Yi Chen said slowly. He held the true martial Thousand Lightning Sword in his hand and walked toward the first peak's peak master, Old Man Mysterious Sword. Oh no! Sensing his killing intent, Old Man Mysterious Sword's expression changed drastically. He immediately roared and condensed another huge sword in his hand. Die! Old Man Mysterious Sword's eyes were bloodshot as he slashed at Yi Chen in an insane manner. "I don't believe that you can't be killed." Slash. Lightning surged on the true martial Thousand Lightning Sword in Yi Chen's hand as he slashed. Break! Rumble! The huge sword instantly turned into a bolt of lightning and collapsed, turning into countless khaki auras that scattered in all directions. Blech! Old Man Mysterious Sword immediately vomited blood, his face extremely pale. At the same time, the 4 people on the other 4 peaks waved the giant swords in their hands and slashed at Yi Chen at the same time. For a time, 4 towering swords blotted out the sky, and all the energy of the heavens and the earth in the entire sword sect had converged here. Monstrous waves rushed out, and the roaring divine sense shook the souls of the crowd, causing their ears to ring and buzz. Night Demon cried out, his eyes filled with excitement, "Master, go! A real man should be more violent." "Good timing," Yi Chen scoffed. The true martial Thousand Lightning Sword trembled violently. Lightning flashed as the sharp sword soared into the sky. The lightning broke through the void and the world shook. In the vast void, there was a bolt of lightning that looked like a flood dragon devouring the origin energy. With just a gentle stroke, it seemed as though the void had been forcibly cut open. Boom! The 4 towering swords were directly destroyed by the lightning WRM. Then, they turned into extremely violent earth chi that swept in all directions. Bang, bang, bang! The 4 people on the 4 sword peaks were immediately sent flying by the violent energy fluctuations, and they spat out mouthfuls of blood. Whoosh! A wave-like uproar broke out on the ground. Everyone's gazes trembled, and their faces twitched. The so-called 5 chi origin formation was broken by Yi Chen alone. Moreover, it was done in an extremely direct and violent way. Oh my God, how is this a human? He's clearly a beast, a humanoid beast. He's invincible. The armor on Mad Southern Yi must be a spirit treasure. Most importantly, Mad Southern Yi must have cultivated an extremely powerful body tempering technique. While countless people were shocked, Yi Chen did not hesitate. He charged at Old Man Mysterious Sword directly with a flash. Oh no! Old Man Mysterious Sword revealed a terrified expression. Without saying a word, he rushed toward Ling Xuanzi. Trying to escape now? Yi Chen's eyes were as cold as a blade. His killing intent was like a raging wave. The true martial thousand lightning sword left his hand and turned into a sword gleam that slashed at lightning speed. No. Facing this strike, Old Man Mysterious Sword roared repeatedly. He slapped his palm as if he wanted to escape into the void. However, it was too late. Just as the space before him began to fluctuate, the sword gleam had already arrived. It sliced him in half and shattered his soul. Yi Chen did not stop. He charged at the other 4 peak masters and slashed with his sword every time. Moreover, along with every single swing of his sword, a peak master of the sword sect would perish, and even their souls weren't spared. "I'll fight you to the death." When only the second peak's peak master was left, his eyes were bloodshot, and his mind was trembling. He charged at Yi Chen fearlessly. The deaths of the 7 peak masters had already made him despair. At that moment, he did not have any hope of surviving at all. As he roared, his body was like a sieve that had been shot, emitting monstrous sword chi. "If you want to die, you'll have to pay the price." The 7th peak's peak master roared one last time and charged at Yi Chen. It shook heaven and earth, as if he wanted to perish together with Yi Chen. Even the expressions of the countless supreme giants watching from the side changed, because even those whose cultivation base was higher than the 7th peak's peak master would be destroyed. However, Yi Chen did not dodge at all. He took a step forward and turned around like the wind as he struck out with his palm. The palm expanded in the wind and turned into a giant hand that forcefully covered the 7th peak's peak master. Rumble! With an earth-shattering explosion, the 7th peak's peak master's body and soul collapsed. Without his control, the countless strands of shocking sword chi that erupted immediately surged towards the surroundings and killed many disciples of the sword sect. At that moment, the entire world was deathly silent. After a short period of silence, it was replaced by shocked cries. From the sword sect's 1st to 8th peak's peak masters, a total of 8 supreme giants had all died in Yi Chen's hands. He was like an emotionless god of death as he reaped lives crazily. It was terrifying and terrifying. This scene made Chun Junzi and the rest of the Dao sect rejoice. They rejoiced that they did not attack Yi Chen with their numbers advantage. Otherwise, they would have ended up like the 8 peak masters of the sword sect. They would have died without a complete corpse and their souls would have been destroyed. The sword sect is finished. That thought appeared in almost everyone's mind. In an instant, countless gazes turned to Ling Xuanzi. The dignified sword sect master actually watched as the elders under him died tragically one after another. He had no intention of doing anything. Yi Chen lifted his head slowly to look at Ling Xuanzi. A calm voice came out of his mouth. "Haha, you're really patient." Under countless gazes, Ling Xuanzi spoke slowly. "Are you a reincarnator? P.S. Chapter 5. I've finished updating for today. I'm so tired. I've been writing from noon until now. I thought about updating less, but in the end, I still relied on my perseverance to finish 5 chapters. Good night, everyone." Chapter 895. The so-called reincarnators. When one's cultivation reached a certain level, even if one died, they would still be able to maintain a trace of spirituality. This trace of spirituality was branded on one's soul. After reincarnation, one would continue on the path of cultivation and awaken the memories of one's previous life. Due to the fact that such a person's cultivation in his previous life was extremely high and that trace of spirituality still existed, once he stepped onto the path of cultivation, his speed of improvement would be extremely shocking. The aptitude and talent he displayed could be said to be terrifying. Even everyone present did not know how long the Kunlun ruins had existed. After all, there had been too many heroes and outstanding people in the endless years. It was not impossible for a few of them to choose reincarnation when their time was up. "Are you a reincarnator?" Ling Xuanzi fixed his eyes on Yi Chen. There was an indescribable fear in his eyes. He knew more about reincarnators than anyone else present, and he had even come into contact with them before. For example, Su Qilin was a reincarnator. This was also the reason why Su Qilin, who came from the secular world, had grown so quickly to become the #1 supreme paragon in the Kunlun ruins. This was also the reason why his sword sect chose Su Qilin between Su Qilin and Yi Wushuang. Therefore, Ling Xuanzi could not help but suspect that Yi Chen was also a reincarnator after seeing how terrifying his combat strength was. Otherwise, it would be impossible to explain all of this. On the other hand, if Yi Chen was really a reincarnator, he would be fearful of him. After all, these reincarnators were all old monsters who lived in seclusion in their previous life. No one could guarantee how many unknown techniques they had. As soon as he finished speaking, many of the powerhouses present were stunned at first. Many of the giants present were stunned at first. Subsequently, their expressions changed drastically. They seemed to have thought of something and looked at Yi Chen. Reincarnator? Could he be a reincarnator? That must be the only reason. Otherwise, how can a person from the secular world, who's only 30 years old, kill nearly 10 supreme giants of our Kunlun ruins consecutively? At that moment, many of the supreme giants looked at each other. There was deep fear in their eyes when they looked at Yi Chen again. Reincarnator? Yi Chen was stunned when he heard that. Subsequently, he secretly laughed. He was not a reincarnator. At most, he was a reincarnator. His silence made Ling Xuanzi mistakenly think that he had guessed correctly, and the fear in his eyes became even more obvious. At the same time, he secretly transmitted his voice to Su Qilin's soul core in his hand. This person is a reincarnator like you. Can you see anything from his moves and behavior? Who knows? Su Qilin's furious voice sounded. When I was still alive, I suppressed the Kunlun ruins for 500 years. No one could stop me. If I count carefully, there has never been such a person in the past 1,000 years. In reality, even he could not see through Yi Chen. Although he was the eldest son of the Su family in the secular world, he had grown up in the Kunlun ruins since he was young. He had almost no feelings for the Su family. After awakening the memories of his previous life, Su Qilin's memories were only a small portion, so he did not care about a mere clan in the secular world. This was also the reason why he was indifferent when the news of the Su family's annihilation came. 1,000 years? Ling Xuanzi frowned slightly. Could it be that this person has existed even longer than you? Like during the Shang and Zhou dynasties? Thinking of this, his pupils shrank. The Shang and Zhou dynasties were the era of the rise of saints. Ling Xuanzi, don't tell me that you're afraid. Su Qilin's voice was mixed with a trace of ridicule. Don't forget that you're the sword sect master. This person killed 8 supreme giants of your sword sect in public. If you let him leave, how will you, Ling Xuanzi, gain a foothold in the Kunlun ruins in the future? Moreover, so what if this person was an old monster from the Shang and Zhou dynasties in his previous life? He has just awakened, so his strength is definitely inferior to yours. With my guidance, it won't be difficult to kill him. Ling Xuanzi did not answer. Instead, he looked at Yi Chen again. May I know where you lived in your previous life? What's your name? Perhaps there's some misunderstanding between us? Misunderstanding? Yi Chen smirked coldly. Your sword sect treated my brother so well. If I didn't come in time, I'm afraid the consequences would be unimaginable. Now you're talking about a misunderstanding with me? The killing intent in his eyes surged. In that case, I can say that it's a misunderstanding when I destroy your sword sect? Shameless boasting. No matter how kind he was, Ling Xuanzi's expression gradually turned grim when he heard Yi Chen's words. So what if you're really a reincarnator? Don't forget that you haven't awakened to your peak yet. As he said that, he looked at Yi Chen with killing intent on his face. I'll give you a chance now since you've offended my sword sect. Either let me plant a soul restriction on you and submit to me, or die. I'll give you the same thing. If you're willing to hand over your soul blood, I might spare your life. Yi Chen smiled in disdain. Very well. Ling Xuanzi's expression turned completely grim, and a chill shot out from his eyes. It's been 300 years, and you're the first person who dares to speak to me like that. As his voice rang out, a chill suddenly spread out between the heavens and earth. The air seemed to have frozen at this moment. It was this invisible change that caused many people to feel a chill in their hearts. Even the circulation of origin energy in their bodies was difficult. Boom! In the next moment, a stream of sword intent surged out from Ling Xuanzi's body like a tidal wave. In the end, it actually reached an unparalleled level. The entire first peak was filled with endless sword intent. If one took a closer look, they would notice that a vacuum had formed around Ling Xuanzi. Sword, come. Ling Xuanzi waved his sleeve, and the main peak of the sword sect's first peak shook violently a few times before exploding with a loud bang. A small sword that was suffused with a green aura and exuded a simple and unadorned aura shot out from the first peak. As soon as the sword appeared, green light shone brightly, and it expanded in the wind. In an instant, it transformed into a sword gleam that was over 60 meters long that traversed the sky. This sudden scene caused everyone to be extremely shocked, especially the disciples of the sword sect's first peak. They lived on the first peak day and night, but they never knew that there was such a divine sword in the main peak of the first peak. Mad Southern Yi, this sword is called the Shadow Containment Sword. It was buried in the main peak of the first peak 200 years ago, and it cultivated the sword chi of the disciples day and night. Ling Xuanzi stood with his sword in hand. His sword intent was shocking, and his might was unparalleled. I've killed no less than 36 supreme giants with my sect. Today you will be the 37th. You're about to die, yet you're still so talkative. Yi Chen's eyes focused. A sword gleam that shot into the sky immediately shot out from his hand and cut all the plants around him. He held the true martial thousand lightning sword in his hand and took a step forward. Sword chi swept through a radius of 300 meters, piercing through the sky before slashing at Ling Xuanzi. At this moment, he strode forward without any hesitation. Lightning flashed in his hand, and he was like an ancient god walking over, causing the world to tremble. Everyone was shocked. Were these two peak supreme giants finally going to fight? Chapter 896. Perfect timing. Ling Xuanzi refused to be outdone. The shadow containment sword in his hand shook and condensed a 300-meter-long sword gleam that slashed at Yi Chen. As soon as the sword appeared, a powerful and violent aura enveloped heaven and earth. The sword was sharp as if it wanted to pierce through space. Just this sword strike alone caused the expressions of many supreme giants to change. The higher one's cultivation base was, the more they could sense how domineering Ling Xuanzi's sword strike was. Not a single supreme giant dared to receive this strike. Whoever received it would die. At this moment, they had no choice but to admit that it was no wonder Ling Xuanzi's sword Dao cultivation base was number 1 in the Kunlun ruins. At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the two people in the sky. Even Yi Wushuang and the rest were no exception. Wush Yi Chen was extremely calm as he pressed forward step by step. Dazzling lightning appeared from the true martial thousand lightning sword as he slashed. A purple sword gleam pierced through the sky as if it was covered in lightning. It transformed into a lightning dragon that charged at the 300-meter-long sword gleam. Rumble, the sword gleam soared through the sky. It seemed to be less than the 300-meter-long sword gleam, but it contained a destructive, invincible, and peerlessly terrifying aura. Under the sword gleam, a mountain peak was sliced in half by him and collapsed. Earth and rocks cracked, and dust flew into the air. It was as if the sky had shattered. Rumble, two shocking sword gleams suddenly collided, and then an incomparably violent energy wave erupted. It directly destroyed all the vegetation within a radius of 300 meters, leaving not a single trace behind. As the sword sect's master, Ling Xuanzi's sword Dao cultivation base is the #1 in the Kunlun ruins. That shocking sword strike just now was actually broken by Mad Southern Yi, who also wielded a sword. Chun Junzi's expression changed drastically. Could it be that Mad Southern Yi is also a sword cultivator? The rest were also shocked. They stared at Yi Chen and felt that this young man had brought them too much shock. A strange gleam flashed through Ling Xuanzi's eyes. The shadow containment sword in his hand seemed to be burning red, and it emitted an extremely terrifying aura. He slashed once more. Sword of the common people. This sword strike seemed extremely ordinary and simple. It did not have an overly shocking momentum, but it was almost immortal. When the sword was unleashed, it was as if this sword was the only thing left in the world. Everything in the world was like an ant to it. Boom! Yi Chen's body suddenly shone brightly. A terrifying brilliance shot out in all directions like a dazzling sun. He took the initiative to meet the sword. Clang! The sword light landed on his body and immediately burst into tens of thousands of sparks, but it only made his body stagnate for a few seconds. How is this possible? When they saw that, all the supreme giants who were watching the battle were shocked. How can Mad Southern Ye's physical body be so powerful after taking Ling Xuanzi's life sword head-on? Ling Xuanzi, is this all you've got? Yi Chen was calm as if he was taking a stroll in the park. Golden gleam shone from his body. Do you think you're worthy of being the sect master of the sword sect with your petty tricks? Ling Xuanzi's gaze was cold, and his entire body was filled with killing intent. He was like a sword of slaughter. He held the hilt of the sword with his right hand and slowly swung it out. 2 mortal swords. Clang, clang, the dazzling sword gleam and the terrifying sword chime pierced through metal and stone, causing one's eardrums to rupture. It was a supreme sword intent that could shatter one's soul. Boom! The shadow containment sword in his hand left his hand and slashed at Yi Chen. Subsequently, ripples spread out in all directions. Anything that came into contact with a tangible object would be destroyed. The shocking sword gleam actually cut the void into 2. Yi Chen was calm when faced with the sword gleam that was coming at him. He placed his right hand that was holding the true martial thousand lightning sword behind his back. Ling Xuanzi, I'll show you what it means to break through all techniques with my strength today. Yi Chen stretched out his fair left hand gently after saying that. It was as if it had come from ancient times and pierced through the void. Then, under everyone's gaze, he gently slapped the sword gleam that cut through the void from afar. Bang! When the fair and slender left hand landed, the void trembled and rumbled. Even all the origin energy of heaven and earth within a radius of 300 meters was annihilated by that palm. In the end, the shadow containment sword that was charging over with sword chi was actually forcefully sent flying by his palm. It floated around the sword sect like a headless fly, causing many mountains to be sliced apart. What? At this moment, everyone could not help but suck in a deep breath of cold air when they saw this. Their eyes were filled with shock. A palm strike, just a palm strike, and Yi Chen sent Ling Xuanzi's shadow containment sword flying? This person is too terrifying, too freakish. The supreme giants of the Spirit Talisman sect paled. Shock surged into the eyes of the rest, and an uproar swiftly exploded like muffled thunder. The supreme giants of the Devil sect rejoiced in their hearts. That was close. Fortunately, we didn't attack him earlier. The remaining supreme giants were shocked as well. After killing 8 supreme giants consecutively, Yi Chen was still on par with Ling Xuanzi. Such combat strength fully proved that Yi Chen was no longer an ordinary supreme giant now. Instead, he was a sect master who stood at the peak of the Kunlun ruins. Ling Xuanzi's expression was extremely grim. He was starting to feel troubled when facing Yi Chen. Just as he was about to move, his pupils constricted violently. A figure that looked like a godly king surged with golden light as it soared into the sky like a bolt of lightning and suppressed him. Yi Chen had counterattacked. He stepped into the air, causing the air to tremble and the world to tremble. It made him look like a god. Every step he took caused the space to tremble. It revealed an extremely terrifying rhythm, causing many people's hearts to almost jump out of their chests. Suddenly, a golden fist force traversed the sky and covered the world as it mercilessly suppressed Ling Xuanzi. Sword domain. Ling Xuanzi's expression was solemn as he stretched out his hand. The shadow containment sword tore through the air and spun crazily in front of him. Every time it spun, it would condense layers of incomparably majestic sword chi storms in front of him. In the end, it formed a sword chi storm that was around 30 meters in diameter, and it was enough to annihilate everything. Before he could react, Yi Chen had already closed in on him. His golden blood energy shook the sky. Break! Rumble, a deafening sound that resembled a clap of thunder from the ninth heaven exploded. Yi Chen was like a fearless death attendant as he charged into the 30 meters tall sword chi storm. He held up the sky with one hand, and the 30 meters tall sword chi storm started to be annihilated at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into a violent energy impact. Boom! Yi Chen swung the golden fist force continuously. Its power was terrifying. All the supreme giants who were watching from afar were horrified. Under such power, even supreme giants would be smashed into meat paste. Bang, bang, bang. When the storm dissipated, Ling Xuanzi let out a muffled groan and spat a mouthful of blood. His body could not help but retreat. Chapter 897. Looking at Ling Xuanzi, who was retreating in the air and spitting blood, the sky and ground suddenly fell silent. He was injured. Ling Xuanzi was actually injured. Unconcealable shock appeared in the eyes of countless people, but most of it was disbelief. In the Kunlun ruins, only the sect masters of the other 9 high sects could compare to Ling Xuanzi's strength. However, he was injured by Yi Chen now. On the other hand, Yi Chen seemed to be possessed by a god of war from the beginning to the end. The more he fought, the more powerful he became. His aura was like a rainbow, and he did not seem to be injured at all. All the supreme giants were shocked. As for the powerhouses below the supreme giants, it was as if heavenly thunder had exploded in their minds at this moment, rumbling incessantly. Before this, even though Yi Chen killed 8 supreme giants consecutively, no one present thought that he would be Ling Xuanzi's match. He might even be killed by Ling Xuanzi as soon as they fought. However, the scene before them gave them a shock. It was like a bolt from the blue. Sect Master is injured? Many sword sect disciples were in a daze. Their sword sect's legend was no match for Yi Chen. I'm sure that he's a reincarnator. Chun Junzi from Dao sect fixed his gaze on Yi Chen's figure. His expression could not stop changing. Such a person has appeared in the Kunlun ruins. It's very likely that he'll suppress the Kunlun ruins in the future. Who else can shake him? How can he be so powerful? Su Yue, who was in the crowd, saw that. Her face was extremely pale. The shock that Yi Chen brought her came wave after wave, causing her to almost lose her balance. At that moment, she regained the respect and even fear she had when she faced Yi Chen in the secular world. Everyone from the 9th peak was shocked, especially Hua Ling. She looked at Yi Chen with a blush. Youngest junior brother's elder brother is so powerful. When everyone was stunned by the scene before them, Ling Xuanzi, who was in the air, stabilized his body. His face was slightly gloomy, and a black glow flickered in his eyes. Ling Xuanzi, you're no match for this person. Su Qilan's cold voice sounded quietly. If you trust me, I can teach you a secret technique that will allow you to unleash twice your combat strength. Even if it's a creation realm cultivator, you can still fight against them. Why would you be so kind? Ling Xuanzi snorted coldly. Even though Su Qilan was a disciple of the sword sect, he wasn't Su Qilan any longer after he'd decided to reincarnate his memories, and his attitude towards the sword sect naturally didn't have any sense of camaraderie. The reason he was still in the sword sect was none other than because he'd come to an agreement with Ling Xuanzi. Even then, both of them were on guard against each other. Of course. Su Qilin laughed coldly. Don't forget, you and I are on the same boat. If you die, I won't be able to live either. Ling Xuanzi's eyes flickered when he heard this. A few seconds later, he replied, All right, but I advise you not to play tricks on me. If I die, you won't be any better off. Release your god's soul now, and I'll teach you a mystic spell. This mystic spell requires the spellcaster to sacrifice his god's soul in order to unleash an extremely powerful force. Ling Xuanzi closed his eyes and slowly released his soul. In the next moment, he felt a blood-red soul shadow entering the depths of his soul. This mystic technique is called the Great Dark Heavenly Devil Shadow. Su Qilin's strange voice slowly sounded. Boom! As the soul shadow entered, Ling Xuanzi's eyes flickered with a dark light, and a trace of extremely terrifying aura faintly spread out. What happened? Why has Ling Xuanzi's aura changed? On the ground, the Supreme Giant's expressions changed when they noticed this. For some reason, they felt goosebumps rise from the depths of their souls. The fluctuation of a primordial spirit? Yi Chen's eyes focused when he saw that. Ling Xuanzi slowly soared into the air. At that moment, endless dark light slanted out from his body. In the end, it formed a dark shadow behind him. Ah! Mad Southern Yi, the battle between us is over. At that moment, Ling Xuanzi seemed to have transformed into a devil from hell. Black fog coiled around him, and his hoarse and arrogant voice resounded through the world. Great dark heavenly devil shadow. With that, he roared into the sky, and then the wriggling black shadow behind him gradually froze. It was as if a towering devil shadow was struggling to break out from behind him. Boom! After the black shadow completely froze, the temperature in the world suddenly dropped, and a gigantic foot slowly stepped out from behind him. Under everyone's gazes, the gigantic foot carried a monstrous murderous aura, and it appeared in this world like a demon king. What an evil aura! At that moment, everyone present could not help but feel their scalps go numb, and their backs were filled with a bone-piercing chill. Almost at that instant, as the gigantic foot took a step forward, a slightly withered figure slowly appeared behind Ling Xuanzi. It was a figure shrouded in black energy. The murderous aura on its body was monstrous, and it was 300 meters tall. No one could see its face clearly. Demon tribe cultivation method? A strange gleam flashed through Yi Chen's eyes. He did not expect there to be a demon tribe cultivation method in the Kunlun ruins. As for the pitch-black figure behind Ling Xuanzi, he had obviously sacrificed a portion of his soul power to summon the projection of a demon. Mad Southern Yi, it's over. Ling Xuanzi smiled sinisterly. Under everyone's gaze, he slowly raised his right hand and pointed at Yi Chen from afar. At the same time, the towering black shadow behind him also raised its hand and pointed at Yi Chen at that moment. Boom! The moment the black shadow pointed at Yi Chen, the space around him suddenly froze. The space around Yi Chen suddenly froze as if someone had locked onto him. He could not escape even if he ran to the ends of the world. At the next moment, as the finger of the towering black shadow descended, the space seemed to have dimmed significantly. Instantly, all the vile energy in the world gathered together, finally condensing into a giant finger that was 300 meters long. The giant finger rippled with a power that caused one's heart to palpitate. This power was not origin energy, but more like Yin energy. It contained a monstrous aura of death. Rumble! As Ling Xuanzi waved his sleeve, the giant finger that was like a giant mountain that could hold up the sky whizzed out. Then, under everyone's shocked gazes, the giant finger pierced through heaven and earth and attacked Yi Chen ruthlessly. Mad Southern Yi is in trouble. Dao Sec's Chun Junzi's pupils constricted violently as he stared at the giant finger. He had never felt such power from Dao Sec's sect master Lei Xing. Just when everyone thought that Yi Chen was no match for Yi Chen, Yi Chen suddenly closed his eyes under everyone's shocked gaze. When he opened his eyes again, his voice was like thunder. My gaze can burn the heavens!